Sitting alone in the quiet light of her room, a young girl writes diligently at her desk, her expression shrouded in a heavy, somber shadow. The narration reveals a tragic past of taking over the novel written by her best friend Ame, who was killed, as a young black-haired girl is shown resting peacefully on a bed of pure white flowers. The narration explains that it is a story where Cecilia, a village girl, meets Charles, a young nobleman, as the silhouette of the blue-haired heroine is shown holding a greatsword. And she sparks a revolution alongside various companions. The author reflects on how she thought she had finally finished writing the story, but everything was about to change. Waking up in an unfamiliar place, she looks into a mirror by candlelight and gasps in utter disbelief as she realizes she has somehow become Cecilia, the light blue-haired princess from her story. The title card of the series appears, "I'll be your saint in the altered world." A red-haired woman with glowing green eyes grits her teeth in sheer rage and frustration as sweat drips down her face. During the summer of my second year in middle school, I was just like any other student, walking down the hallways with my classmates. With no particular joy or sorrow, I was living what you would call an ordinary life. But I was doing everything I could to maintain that monotony. "Keep your hobbies in moderation," my mother would scold, holding up my poor test scores. "Think about your future and study well. Don't get too close to anyone. Friends will only cause trouble. Don't be a nuisance." These were the words that came from my hysterical parents' mouths over and over again. I lived my life doing exactly what I was told to do, never stepping out of line. She turns around with a look of quiet surprise as she steps through the classroom doorway. Amidst all those restrictions, her eyes were different. Standing at the back of the classroom, I looked at Ame, whose eyes looked so incredibly dazzling. "This is Ame." She happily calls out, "Haru." She was always writing novels in the classroom after school. "You're always cutting it close, haha." Ame laughs as Haru sighs with relief, saying, "Looks like I'll be able to hand in my homework in time." And now we're close enough to brainstorm the plot of her novel together. Looking at a drawn illustration, Haru asks, "Did you draw the protagonist?" Army blushes excitedly and says, "Yeah, I made her hair light blue. What do you think?" Haru's face lights up with sparkles as she admires the drawing and exclaims, "Oh, she's so cute." Ame is absolutely thrilled and beams with a huge, joyful smile. Seeing her reaction, Haru smiles and says, "Wow, you're really happy, aren't you?" Amy was like no other girl I had ever met before. Smiling and writing her novel with all her might, she became someone entirely different from my other friends. Walking home together during a warm sunset, Haru asks, "Do you not talk to anyone else, Ame?" Ame looks down thoughtfully as their long shadows stretch across the road, replying, "Well, I don't have any other friends. I've loved writing novels ever since I was little. Even when things were hard, thinking about what happens next in my story cheered me up." Ame continues warmly as they sit side by side in the classroom. "That's why this novel is more important to me than anything. You were the first person who ever said they wanted to read it, Haru." She smiles brightly, her face bathed in a warm glow as she says, "I was so happy when you praised it." Looking at Haru with complete sincerity, Ame softly adds, "You are my only friend, Haru." Haru stares at Ame, momentarily speechless and deeply moved by her honest confession. Standing in the dim corridor, Haru wonders to herself, "Then what about me?" One night a month later, a tragic accident occurs, leaving a girl lying lifeless on the asphalt in a pool of blood under the flashing lights of an ambulance. In the school stairwell, a girl anxiously whispers, "Akari, are we really going to be okay?" With a wide, terrified eye, she asks, "Won't people find out that we were the ones who did it?" The leader of the group smirks maliciously and replies, "It's her own fault for jumping out like that to grab her notebook. It'll be fine. It's not like we pushed her ourselves." Overhearing their conversation from the shadows, Haru's face twists with immense shock and rage as they sneer, "She left that creepy notebook on her desk. She brought this upon herself." Before I knew it, my fists flew and I struck the laughing bully right across the face. For over half a year, Ame had been bullied by Akari and her rebuke, but they were never punished. Instead, a transfer request sits on the desk as my distraught mother cries, "Hey Haru, why can't you just do as you're told? Making such a huge scene and causing trouble for the school. Don't cause us any more trouble, please." Haru stands in silence, bearing the crushing weight of her parents' anger as they demand, "Why did you do this?" Clutching her skirt tightly in despair, she thinks, "If I had just listened to my mother, I wouldn't have had to transfer. Just why did I—" Tears stream down her face as she weeps at her desk, admitting to herself, "The truth is, I wanted to fight alongside Ame, but I was too scared of retaliation and my parents' disappointment, so I turned a blind eye." That decision kept Ame in agony and caused her to die in the end. 5 years have passed since that day. Even now, as a college student, my regret hasn't faded. Sleeping soundly at her desk late into the night, she reflects, "This novel, which I continued to write to completion as if in repentance, is ultimately nothing more than self-satisfaction." Surrounded by a beautiful field of blue flowers, Haru tightly embraces Ame and prays, "Please give me a chance to save Ame." A low rumbling sound echoes through the pitch-black room as she groans. Waking up in a daze, she reaches her hand out and thinks, "Oh no, did I fall asleep writing the novel?" Waking up to an unfamiliar sensation, a girl with long, beautifully braided blue hair looks around in confusion. Sitting up at a large wooden bed inside a dimly lit room, she looks around and asks, "Where am I?" "Huh? What is this?" she stammers, staring at her reflection in the mirror, shocked to find herself with vibrant blue hair, blue eyes, and a mysterious birthmark on her hand. Looking down in awe, she whispers, "A birthmark on my hand? Light blue hair? I've seen this somewhere," as the memory of Ame's princess sketch suddenly flashes before her. Staring in wide-eyed disbelief, she struggles to comprehend the surreal reality she has just woken up to. The protagonist, Cecilia's, defining features are her beautiful light blue hair and the birthmark on her hand that only appears on those who are loved by magic. If I'm not mistaken about this birthmark, I've become Cecilia? The sensation is far too real to be a dream. But what happened to the world I was just in? And why am I inside Ame's novel in the first place? I finished the novel and fell right asleep. Calm down. If this really is a saint for whom, I have to do exactly what Cecilia did, or the story will break and go into chaos, and I absolutely don't want that. I couldn't protect Ame's life, so at the very least, I want to protect this world that Aim cherished more than anything else. It's fine. I've been looking over Ame's novel for more than 5 years. I remember the story perfectly. First, I need to understand my current situation. Judging by the state of this room, Cecilia is still just a villager. Also, I heard the bell chime 3 times when I woke up. That's the signal that rings when a noble arrives. Today is probably the day she meets Charles, which marks the beginning of the story. If I don't meet Charles, the revolution won't happen and the country will collapse. I have to meet him first. Everything else comes after that. Rushing outside, she expects to find her fated meeting, but instead she is met with a horrific scene of fire, chaos, and imperial soldiers binding the terrified villagers. Huh? What on earth is going on? He's not Charles? This man is. This man is Leon Morganite, Cecilia's last companion and the strongest man who has mastered swordsmanship. But why is someone like him here? It's still a long way off before we meet. Thank you, villagers. I have come here after receiving direct orders from the king. I'm a police officer. Cecilia stares in absolute shock and horror as a terrifying proclamation is made. The people of this village will be executed at this place. Standing alongside a terrified Cecilia and another village woman, a young brown-haired man shouts out in desperate protest, "There are no witches here. Did you even investigate properly?" The young man continues to plead desperately, asking why they are being treated this way when they aren't from an enemy kingdom, and declaring, "This village is under the jurisdiction of the Lapis Lazuli family." Yet the pink-haired officer only stares back with a cold, indifferent expression. Without any warning, the red-coated officer draws his sword and mercilessly slashes a defenseless villager in cold blood. Fresh blood splatters across the horrified faces of the onlookers as absolute panic begins to set in. I will answer your question. The Lapis Lazuli family, who used to protect this village, are in prison on suspicion of treason. There's no one left to protect this village. Hey, you all, start with that woman over there. As the mother and child cry out in despair, the officer sneers that since her husband objected, he will start by punishing her first. Crying out in sheer terror, she trembles as a sense of helpless dread overwhelms her. People are dying in front of me. I have never gone through anything like this. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Someone? Tears stream down her face as a terrifying shadow looms over her, leaving her frozen in sheer helplessness. Mom! The mother weeps in agony, clutching her head in complete despair as her child is torn from her. Help me. What is it, Haru? Ready. It's nothing. What was that? Suddenly, a traumatic memory flashes before her eyes, the horrifying sight of her friend lying lifeless in a pool of blood on the asphalt after the accident. Someone. Help me? The painful memory of that day triggers a sudden spark of resolve in her tear-filled eyes. She looks up through her tears at Leon Morganite, who stands towering before her like an unyielding shadow. It is a direct order from the king, so even this guy from the Morganite family will have to listen to me. Truthfully speaking, there's no need to kill them, but it feels good to see the commoners die in fear. I'll drive them into despair. Do it, Leon. Please stop.
I would be grateful if you could give me an opportunity to negotiate with Lord Leon.
Huh? Determined to make a change, Haru reflects on her past regret of turning a blind eye to her friend's suffering, promising herself that she will never do it again. Realizing the danger she is in, Cecilia steels her resolve, crying out that she cannot afford to die in a place like this. As the captive villagers tremble on the ground, a woman desperately warns Cecilia that Lord Leon has absolutely no interest in negotiating. The cruel red-coated officer sneers and turns back, calling out to confirm his ruthless intentions with Lord Leon. Observing the hesitant and uneasy expressions of Leon's subordinates, Cecilia realizes that they are not on board with the heartless execution of the villagers. Seeking common ground, Cecilia speaks up to remind Lord Leon of the time she saw him at the capital city hall when she went to get permission to cultivate a new fruit. Desperate to stop the violence, Cecilia looks directly at Leon and his men, pleading with them to join her in fighting against the tyrannical king. Cecilia remembers that Leon is supposed to be a major ally character in the novel, though he currently seems to be under the authority of the royal police. She realizes that if she can somehow convince him to join her side, she might stand a chance at stopping the ruthless officer. Infuriated by her impudence, the blood-stained officer violently grabs Cecilia by her collar, screaming that the king's orders are absolute and she is just a mere villager. Unfazed, Cecilia fiercely argues back, calling the king's order to execute an entire village without any proof of witchcraft completely ridiculous. She boldly questions whether the king also ordered the slaughter of the families of anyone who dared to speak out against his rule. She pulls no punches, declaring that both the king who ordered this and the officer who blindly follows it are absolute scum, causing the officer to shake with pure rage. Shouting in anger, the officer violently grabs Cecilia by her light blue hair, causing her to cry out in pain. The officer slams her face first onto the hard ground, accusing her of not only plotting treason but also displaying extreme insolence. Deeming the entire village corrupt, the officer commands Leon to execute Cecilia and the rest of the villagers immediately. Weak and pinned to the dirt, Cecilia looks up with desperation and calls out to Leon one last time. Annoyed by Leon's silence, the officer yells at him, demanding to know if he is even listening to his orders. Leon finally speaks, staring down coldly and noting with interest that Cecilia refuses to beg for her life. Cecilia lies bruised on the ground, looking up in shock as she waits to see what the legendary swordsman will do. Leon quietly contemplates how interesting her defiance is, knowing most people would have pleaded for mercy by now. Making his decision, Leon turns to his men and commands them to seize the officer instead. The red-coated officer is suddenly grabbed and pinned from behind by Leon's subordinates, screaming in shock and threatening to report their betrayal to the king. Leon steps forward slowly, coldly telling the terrified officer to go ahead and try. Looming over the pinned officer, Leon adds with a chilling glare that he can only report it if he manages to survive. Horror washes over the officer as he realizes that Leon and his men had planned to betray the kingdom from the very beginning. Leon looks down at him with utter disgust, stating that he has absolutely nothing to say to a man like him. Leon's face is bathed in a menacing red light as he tells the officer that ordering the slaughter of innocent villagers just to vent his frustrations is unforgivable, promising he won't die easily. Restraining the violent oppressor is the most effective way to prevent further casualties and secure the safety of the community. As the guards firmly hold him back to neutralize any further threat, the terrified officer shrieks in desperate, hypocritical panic, "Stop it! Please don't kill me! Eek!" Gazing upon the aftermath with a calm and analytical focus, the commander assesses how to restore societal order and secure the greatest overall benefit for the survivors, his steady expression reflecting a mind geared toward minimizing future harm. To maximize the survival rate and alleviate collective suffering, resources are immediately directed to those in critical need as the order echoes out. Free the villagers! Anyone with healing magic should heal them! Soldiers and villagers work together to untie captives and administer healing magic, restoring stability to the community. Meanwhile, one of Leon's gentle subordinates helps Cecilia to her feet, politely telling her to be careful. Looking at her hands in utter disbelief, Cecilia realizes that she has somehow survived the encounter. Under the warm evening sky, Leon walks up to her and directly asks her for her name. Looking up at him in quiet awe, she softly replies that her name is Cecilia. With a stern expression, Leon turns around and tells her to come along with him. Seeing his actions, Cecilia smiles with immense relief, realizing that Leon is still the kind person he was in the novel. As they walk through the campsite toward the carriages, she reflects that despite his cold demeanor, he is still the trustworthy ally she knew. A woman with short mint green hair and a dark cloak approaches and respectfully greets Leon. Leon introduces her as his right-hand man, Lamb, and instructs both Cecilia and Lamb to board the carriage. Startled but compliant, Cecilia quickly responds in the affirmative. Inside the carriage, Cecilia sits across from a quiet, imposing Leon while Lamb stands guard beside him. Leon breaks the silence, sincerely thanking Cecilia for her brave actions in trying to protect the children of the village. However, his eyes narrow as he warns her that fighting alongside them in a war is an entirely different matter. He bluntly asks what a simple village girl could possibly achieve, demanding she prove the benefits of joining his cause. Leon leans back, questioning if it is truly worth dragging an untrained civilian like her into their dangerous conflict. Resting his gloved hand on his knee, Leon reveals his plan to launch a full-scale rebellion against the current kingdom. He explains that he plans to gather allies among the regional nobles before marching on the royal capital, warning her that there will be unavoidable casualties. Leon admits that while he welcomes comrades who share his ideals, he cannot risk bringing someone who cannot fight onto a battlefield, as it would only jeopardize their victory. Knowing this is her one chance to join him, Cecilia stares back with determined eyes, realizing she must negotiate successfully. She tells herself that she absolutely cannot afford to fail this negotiation if she wants to protect this world. She recalls that in the original novel, Cecilia used the magical birthmark on her hand to gain Charles's trust, but she knows her mission is much larger than just starting a revolution. Looking at a vision of a burning book, she resolves to protect the story that Ame cherished so deeply, even if the timeline has already begun to change. Thinking to herself, Cecilia realizes that her magical birthmark alone won't be enough to convince Leon, and she desperately searches her mind for anything else she can use to negotiate. Suddenly, a memory of her past life as Ame flashes before her eyes, and she realizes with a spark of excitement that she has the perfect leverage. There's a possibility for this negotiation to succeed. Steeling her resolve, Cecilia stands confidently, ready to face the legendary swordsman and present her terms. Wait! As Cecilia raises her hand to stop them, Lamb instinctively reaches for her sword, but Leon calmly orders her to stand down. Lord Leon, your swordsmanship was taught to you by Lord Rior, the late king's younger uncle, right? How do you know that? And the first time you won a sword fight was at the age of 8? Your opponent was your classmate, Hans. Isn't that right? Leon is left completely speechless, staring at her in stunned silence as he tries to comprehend how a simple village girl could know his deeply kept secrets. I possess the power to obtain information about a target just by focusing on them. I can obtain all the information you desire. This rebellion will surely succeed. I will not lend you this power until you promise me that no one will be killed. Don't get carried away. Infuriated by her audacity, Lamb draws her sword in a flash, pointing the sharp blade directly at Cecilia's throat. Do you really think Lord Leon's decision here was made overnight? Do you have any idea how painful a decision it is to rebel against the king with one's own hands? You wouldn't understand that. A village girl with no resolve, spouting nonsense about not wanting to kill people. If you trouble Lord Leon any further, I'll chop your head off. Lamb screams in fury, while Cecilia quietly reflects on the true meaning of resolve. I will show it to you right here. Without hesitating, Cecilia steps forward directly into the blade, letting the sharp steel slice into her neck as blood begins to trickle down. What are you doing? This sword is not some rusty blade you find anywhere. Do you have some death wish? If you wish for me to use my power, please promise me that you will start a revolution without killing anyone. If you promise me that, I will surely make you king, Lord Leon. If this condition cannot be met, then I cannot help you. Why are you so insistent on not killing, even toward those who would harm you? Cecilia remains silent, looking down as the painful weight of her past memories holds her back. A tragic memory flashes in her mind, the horrifying sight of her friend lying lifeless on the asphalt after a sudden accident. I've been running away all this time, averting my eyes, pretending it had nothing to do with me. For someone like me, I've been given a chance at atonement. What are you talking about? I don't want to lose anyone ever again. Leon stares at her in quiet awe, deeply struck by the sheer intensity of the raw emotion and sincerity in her eyes. You're trembling. Despite her brave and resolute words, Cecilia's body trembles in sheer terror as she faces the cold reality of the blade against her neck. First you shed tears from the fear of death, and then you offer up your own neck for the sake of others. You are quite interesting. Embarrassed, Cecilia realizes with a flush of shame that Leon had witnessed her crying earlier. Leon quietly folds his arms, observing her defiance with a thoughtful and calculating expression. Yes, at Leon's command, Lamb steps forward while holding a secure, ornate wooden chest. As the chest is opened, a dark, magical parchment floats into the air, radiating a brilliant golden light. What is this? A magical paper that forms a contract with the heart as its foundation. It is the Book of Life Vows. Those who enter into a contract must put their lives on the line to uphold what is written here. Not that it would matter, because if that happened, I would be the first to cut you down, Lamb adds with a stern glare, causing Cecilia to gulp in nervousness. If there are no flaws in the contract, place your hand on it. Swallowing her fear, Cecilia hesitantly raises her hand toward the glowing magical parchment. Under a bright, hopeful light, Leon stands as a vital pillar of strength, representing the ultimate strategic asset needed to protect innocent lives. With a feather drifting gently in the air, his calm, unyielding resolve symbolizes the protective stability essential for ensuring the survival and long-term welfare of the community.
I have high expectations.
Suddenly, panic sets in as Cecilia realizes she has casually agreed to an incredibly dangerous contract. In her mind, Cecilia screams in absolute panic, realizing that if she fails to pull off a completely bloodless revolution in this chaotic world, she will actually die.
To maintain critical awareness and prevent costly mistakes in a high-stakes environment, a sharp voice suddenly snaps Cecilia back to reality, demanding to know why she is spacing out instead of focusing on the immediate situation at hand. Prioritizing physical recovery to ensure everyone can contribute optimally to their shared safety, Lamb instructs Cecilia to immediately get her sword wound treated, prompting Cecilia to quickly agree so she can restore her health and functionality. Systematically planning their steps to achieve the greatest strategic advantage and restore societal order, Lamb notes that they will move to subdue the first noble once Cecilia's treatment is complete. Leon then looks back, promising Cecilia that once they succeed in neutralizing the threat in their target territory, he will share crucial intelligence about the state of the country so they can coordinate future actions for the maximum benefit of all. First, you will show me whether that power of yours is genuine. Yes?
Cecilia recalls the key figures from the novel: Vest, the first target, Annabelle, the second, and Aogiri, the third. With the novel's timeline already completely altered, she worries about who her real enemies will be, especially since Charles is missing.
Of all the figures, the one she fears meeting the most is the brilliant but sinister Aogiri. That red-haired woman. Under a dark, stormy sky filled with torrential rain and flashing lightning, a furious voice echoes from within a grand estate. A glass filled with red wine is violently shattered, sending shards of glass and red liquid flying in all directions. Lord Vest is gripped by absolute panic, desperately clutching his head as he worries about his fate after opposing his allies. Suddenly, he hears a voice asking what is wrong and looks down in surprise.
A wet, dark-haired man smiles drippingly, apologizing as he explains that he cannot shake the habits from his homeland.
Lord Vest sighs with relief, realizing this could be a blessing in disguise. Looking at the dark-haired man putting on a robe, Lord Vest admits that he never expected such a powerful individual would be willing to lend him a hand. The mysterious man promises to ensure Lord Vest's successful escape, prompting Vest to place his trust in him, referring to him as the strongest mage.
Bathed in a cold blue light from the window, the sinister man smiles with glowing purple eyes, revealing his true identity as the powerful mage Aogiri.
Under a clear blue sky, Leon arrives on horseback outside the grand iron gates of Lord Vest's estate along with his subordinates. The guards stationed at the gate look absolutely bewildered and shocked by the sudden arrival of the legendary swordsman and his men.
Leon speaks from atop his black horse, stating that he has business with the lord of the manor, identifying himself as Morganite.
Trembling with respect and fear, the gate guard quickly bows and confirms that he understands the request. The heavy iron gates swing open, allowing Leon and his retinue to ride their horses into the estate's courtyard. Inside the luxurious estate, Malade Vest warmly welcomes Leon with a feigned, polite smile. Leon steps forward into the room, calmly greeting Lord Vest and noting that it has been a long time since they last met. Sweating nervously despite his bright smile, Lord Vest asks Leon what could have possibly brought him to his estate today. Leon explains that by the king's order, he has captured a rumored witch from a nearby village and asks if it is possible for his subordinates to stay and rest there for a short while. Lord Vest's eyes widen slightly in interest as he cheerfully acknowledges Leon's explanation. Leon firmly states that he intends to stay together with his subordinates during their visit. Pleased, Lord Vest offers to personally escort Leon to the barracks, an offer which Leon politely accepts. In a high-angle view of the town, the carriages move through the streets. Inside the carriage, Lord Vest sits opposite Leon, Lamb, and a gagged Cecilia, asking if she is indeed the rumored witch. Lord Vest looks closely at Cecilia, who sits tied and gagged, observing her quiet demeanor. Staring at Cecilia with narrow, calculating eyes, Lord Vest inwardly notes that her face isn't bad at all, smiling creepily. Turning to Leon, Lord Vest greedily requests that the disposal of the witch be left entirely to him so that Leon does not have to dirty his hands. Realizing the sinister noble's intentions, Cecilia gasps in terror behind her gag. Leon immediately rejects the offer, coldly stating that leaving her disposal to Vest won't be necessary. Lord Vest's smile wavers as Leon suddenly shifts the conversation, addressing him directly. Lord Vest is taken aback as Leon boldly asks him about his thoughts regarding the current king. Laughing nervously, Lord Vest tries to play it safe, sweat dropping as he praises the king as a wonderful person. Leon stares back with an incredibly cold and unimpressed glare,
silent in his assessment of the noble. Leon speaks frankly, admitting that he honestly believes the king's current politics are not good. Cecilia is utterly dumbfounded in her mind, shocked that Leon would openly criticize the king to someone who could easily be a potential enemy. Leon continues speaking to Lord Vest, revealing his true motives and plans. Lord Vest listens intently, realizing that Leon's arrival and bold words carry a much deeper meaning. Lord Vest grins sinisterly in the shadows, thrilled to discover that the legendary swordsman harbors such rebellious views, while Lamb watches him cautiously. Lord Vest dramatically claims that while he was once content with simply governing his territory and managing its people, his eyes have now been opened and he cannot remain complacent. Leaning forward with dramatic flair, Lord Vest declares to Leon and a shocked Cecilia that he shares the exact same ambition. Cecilia is horrified, realizing with dread that the timeline has shifted drastically and the corrupt Lord Vest has now aligned himself with Leon. Leon looks at him with a piercing gaze, asking if he is truly willing to lend them his strength. The noble eagerly declares that together they will kill the king. Lord Vest lets out a dramatic laugh, ecstatic at the thought of building a brand new kingdom. Revealing his true greedy nature, Lord Vest laughs maniacally, gloating that they will levy even more taxes from the common people to live a life of unprecedented wealth. Cecilia watches in absolute disgust and horror, realizing just how vile and selfish Lord Vest truly is. Bathed in a dramatic spotlight, Lord Vest reflects on how long he has been waiting for an opportunity to rise above his current station. A fiery-haired woman with glowing green eyes looks on with intense rage and determination as rain falls around her. Lord Vest sneers, stating that managing filthy commoners is far below a man of his high stature, while Lamb sits nearby with her eyes closed in quiet irritation. With a creepy, wide-eyed smile, Lord Vest promises that when the day comes to kill the king, he will entrust Leon with his status and honor. As dusk settles over the estate, Leon's men prepare for their stay while Lord Vest and Lamb discuss the arrangements in the background. Inside the quiet carriage, Leon gently removes the gag from Cecilia's face, apologizing for having to restrain her even though it was all just an act. Cecilia blushes deeply as Leon turns to her, noting that she had spoken her true feelings earlier. Leon holds the rope restraints in his gloved hands, explaining that he always planned to recruit anyone who shares his ultimate ambition, regardless of who they are. Cecilia looks down in silence, her expression filled with a mix of sadness and deep reflection as she contemplates the weight of the rebellion. Leon looks down with a calm yet intense gaze, asking Cecilia if she is hesitating now that they are face to face with the enemy they must defeat. Cecilia smiles softly with her eyes closed, feeling a quiet sense of relief. A distressing memory of a blood-stained, grinning man flashes before Cecilia's eyes, leaving her shocked and trembling. Clutching her neck where the blade had been, Cecilia grits her teeth, feeling exhausted after everything she has just gone through. Leon stands tall, advising Cecilia that she should rest at the barracks today to recover her strength. As he begins to walk away, Leon glances back to deliver one last instruction. Framed by beautiful pink roses, Leon tells Cecilia to stop using honorifics with him, declaring that since they have entered into a contract through the Book of Life Vows, they are now equals. Cecilia's heart skips a beat as she blushes deeply, completely captivated by his sudden declaration of equality. Inside a quiet room, Leon, Cecilia, and Lamb gather around a rustic wooden table to discuss their next moves. Lamb slams the table in frustration, venting her anger at how detestable Lord Meliad Vest remains. Leon rests his chin on his hands, admitting that while he had some expectations, the corrupt noble ultimately only cares about his own greed. Clenching her fist, Lamb fumes at how Vest claimed to share Leon's ambition when he does nothing but torment his people for selfish desires. Leon calmly pacifies Lamb, noting that Vest's delusion is actually beneficial for their upcoming operation. Meanwhile, Cecilia sits between them, wearing her newly bought clothes. Cecilia is struck by the word operation, realizing that things are indeed proceeding exactly as she had suspected. Standing up from the table, Lamb prepares to execute the plan as originally agreed. With a sharp and resolute expression, Leon declares that they will capture Vest and liberate the entire territory. Cecilia contemplates that taking Mela down will not be too difficult, reflecting on the illegal and discriminatory system he imposed on the local farmers. Under Malad's corrupt rule, the truth of his exploitation was heavily suppressed, but once the people learn the reality, he will naturally be driven out by their fury. In the novel's original timeline, Vest would have fled abroad, leaving Cecilia to successfully liberate the oppressed citizens. Cecilia worries that if things go wrong, there is a strong possibility Vest will try to flee to the capital instead. Leon listens intently, clasping his hands together as he processes Cecilia's warning. Over a high-angle view of the Grand Castle, Leon explains that if they fail to capture Vest, the corrupt noble will defect to the king's side and expose their entire rebellion. Lamb looks serious, noting that they must figure out Vest's exact escape plan before he catches on to their trap. Leon looks directly at Cecilia, asking her to show him her power. Lamb leans over the table in disbelief, questioning if Cecilia can truly figure out the noble's secret escape route. With a look of quiet confidence, Cecilia nods firmly in response. Clenching her hands in her lap, Cecilia resolves that just like in the novel, she must save the people from Malade's cruelty. Standing proudly before a backdrop of blooming roses, Cecilia boldly declares that she will personally capture the target. In his lavish quarters, Malay Vest sips red wine, mocking Leon for foolishly spelling out his entire plan right to him. With a wicked smirk, Vest orders Aogiri to move up their schedule and prepare his strongest magical spell. Peering through his monocle, Aogiri grins sinisterly with glowing purple eyes, noting that the Lord is in quite a rush. Aogiri's face is reflected in shattered shards alongside Cecilia's, as he remarks that as long as he can enjoy himself, anything is fine. Deep in the lush green forest, Lamb and several knights crouch low in the bushes, keeping watch as they prepare for the ambush. Lamb sweats nervously, wondering if Lord Vest will actually show up in a secluded place like this. Back at the table, Cecilia explains to Leon and Lamb that Vest plans to escape using a hidden path concealed by perception-blocking magic. Lamb questions how they can possibly track Vest if his location is completely hidden by magic. Cecilia explains that once Vest enters the forest, he will let his guard down and deactivate the magic, allowing them to catch him in an ambush. Leon commands Lamb to stay on standby in the forest, catching her completely by surprise. Leon reveals his plan to head straight for Vest himself, aiming to capture him before he can even reach the secret path. Outside Lord Vest's grand estate, a guard announces Leon's arrival, and Vest eagerly orders him to be shown in. Leon enters the opulent drawing room, politely greeting Lord Vest, who welcomes him with a fake, theatrical display of warmth. Vest grandly gestures toward a luxurious green sofa, inviting the legendary swordsman to take a seat. Leon sits down gracefully, thanking Vest for his generous hospitality during their stay. Leaning in with a creepy, eager grin, Vest brings up the rebellion, asking Leon where they should begin their grand plan. Leon looks back with a calm, cold expression, stating that he has already decided on their starting point. Vest smiles greedily, asking what the plan is and eagerly promising to accompany Leon in his endeavors. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the room are violently thrown open with a loud crash. A group of Leon's armored knights marches into the room, catching the corrupt noble completely off guard. Gripped by sudden panic, Lord Vest stammers in shock, demanding to know the meaning of this intrusion. Standing tall and imposing, Leon coldly declares that they will start their operation by seizing Vest's territory. Lord Vest demands to know why Leon is doing this, shouting that if the rebellion succeeds, wealth and fame will be all theirs for the taking. Leon calmly responds that this is a rebellion for the people who are suffering under the current kingdom's administration. Looking at Lord Vest's clenched fist, Leon coldly concludes that they are completely incompatible. Lord Vest fumes, shouting that Leon won't get away with this, as his ornate cane begins to glow with magical energy. Lord Vest vanishes in a flash of light, leaving the knights panicked as they shout to find him, while Leon stands in silent contemplation. High above the bustling town square, Cecilia stands in simple peasant attire among the citizens, her expression resolute as she prepares to take action. Dusk begins to settle over the territory as the plan is set in motion to head into town. Gathered around a rustic table, Leon, Cecilia, and Lamb sit in quiet deliberation, finalizing their strategy over tea. Cecilia argues passionately that the people of the territory have suffered the most, and she wants to ask for their cooperation to blockade the town so Lord Vest cannot escape. Lamb questions how they can accomplish this, but Leon places his trust in Cecilia, promising to prepare a sword for her protection and leaving the townspeople in her hands. Leon's words of encouragement echo in Cecilia's mind, urging her not to be afraid and reminding her of her strength to stand up against the guards. Cecilia thinks of the oppressed citizens who have been wounded by unfair treatment for years and have given up on living as themselves. She is momentarily seized by self-doubt, wondering how someone like her could possibly influence them to take a stand. A vision of Leon's calm, reassuring face comes to mind, reiterating his firm belief that she can succeed. Finding her resolve, Cecilia realizes that she must believe in herself just as much as Leon believes in her. Clenching her fists with her sword strapped to her waist, Cecilia looks toward the sky, determined to see the mission through to the very end. Cecilia steps firmly onto the wooden stage in the middle of the crowded square, drawing the attention of the gloomy, downcast peasants passing by. Cecilia cries out to gather the crowd's attention, leaving the nearby townspeople whispering in confusion about what is happening. The murmurs grow louder as the peasants look at each other, wondering who this mysterious woman is and what she wants. Cecilia boldly announces to the crowd that Lord Vest is trying to flee the land because Leon Morganite has initiated a revolution.
She warns them that if Vest escapes, the revolution will fail, and pleads with them to help blockade the town to cut off his escape route. A wave of hesitation washes over the crowd as a voice calls out, flatly refusing to get involved in such dangerous matters. The peasants voice their fears, shouting about their wives and families, terrified of what will happen to them if they take part and get killed. Many of the townspeople begin to walk away, muttering that they can survive well enough as things are and begging to just be left alone. A man stops in his tracks, turning back with an irritated and shocked expression as Cecilia's next words catch him off guard. Cecilia speaks with deep empathy, pointing out that they have all given up and accepted a life completely devoid of dreams. She evokes a vision of innocent, smiling children playing freely in a peaceful world filled with flowers and laughter. Cecilia challenges the parents directly, asking if they are going to force their own children to throw away their hopes too, and questioning if that can truly be called protecting their family. Her poignant words strike a deep chord, leaving the men in the crowd wide-eyed and speechless as they reflect on their own complacency. Gritting his teeth in frustration, a peasant asks in a low voice what exactly they can possibly do against such powerful forces. Cecilia raises her hand high, unleashing a brilliant magical glow from her crest as she declares that they must fight so everyone can follow their hearts and keep chasing their dreams. The townspeople gasp in absolute awe, bathing in the beautiful blue light and wondering aloud who this remarkable woman is. With a dramatic flourish, Cecilia draws and raises her shining sword, boldly revealing her true identity as Saintess Cecilia. Cecilia raises her sword high into the air, desperately pleading with the citizens to lend her their strength for the sake of their future. Staring at her in awe, a man thinks of his unborn child, his heart finally beginning to swell with hope. The peasants envision a future where their children can live with smiles on their faces, pursue any dream they want, and walk with their heads held high. Overcome with emotion and newly found courage, a man roars out in agreement, ready to join the fight. The square erupts into passionate cheers as the peasants raise their fists, eagerly declaring their allegiance, while Cecilia smiles with immense relief. A massive, angry mob of townspeople armed with pitchforks, shovels, and clubs marches through the rain, shouting that they have spotted Lord Vest. Wearing dark cloaks to conceal their identities, Lord Vest and his remaining guards hurry through the streets, glancing back in panic at the gathering noise. The angry voices of the townspeople echo through the alleyways as they pursue the corrupt noble, leaving Lord Vest sweating and fuming over why those vermin are chasing him. Cecilia runs swiftly through the town, noting that the townspeople's rebellion has successfully thrown Vest into a panic, and resolves to reach Lamb's location as quickly as possible. After repeatedly using teleportation magic, Lord Vest finally reaches the entrance of the secret path, grinning sinisterly as he believes his escape is now fully guaranteed. Despite reaching safety, Vest is still thoroughly baffled and annoyed, wondering why on earth those lowly peasants would dare to chase after him. He grumbles to himself that if it hadn't been for those meddlesome peasants, he could have escaped easily without even needing to use this secret path. Shrugging it off, Lord Vest consoles himself with the thought of defecting to the king's side and enjoying all the sweet, luxurious rewards the capital has to offer. As Lord Vest eagerly spots the exit of the secret path, he fails to notice Lamb watching him silently from the trees above, ready to spring her trap. Cornered and outmaneuvered, Lord Vest's face pales in absolute horror as he stammers, demanding to know how they could have possibly found him. Moving through the lush forest, Cecilia's confident expression suddenly vanishes, replaced by a look of sheer shock as she catches sight of something ahead. Cecilia is met with a horrifying scene as she finds Lamb and the knights lying unconscious on the forest floor, crying out Lamb's name in sheer panic. Kneeling beside the unconscious knight on the forest floor, Cecilia looks around in panic and wonders in disbelief what on earth could have happened to Lamb and the others. Looking up in sheer terror, Cecilia's eyes widen as Lord Vest suddenly appears before her, coldly recognizing her as the witch from their past encounter. Sensing Lord Vest's sudden tension, Ayogiri peers over his shoulder and asks if there is something the matter. Aogiri smiles sinisterly as he notices Cecilia, commenting that it seems there was one more rat hiding in the forest, while Cecilia trembles in shock at his unexpected presence. Gazing upon the sinister, smiling figure with long blue hair and glowing purple eyes behind his chained glasses, Cecilia is struck with sudden dread and disbelief as she wonders to herself in shock, why is Aogiri here? Shaking off her sudden fear, Cecilia turns her immediate attention back to her wounded ally, desperately calling out Lamb's name. Cecilia kneels down by Lamb's side, gently shaking him as she tries to wake him up from his unconscious state. Slowly opening his eyes, Lamb weakly apologizes to Cecilia, admitting that everything turned out exactly as she had warned them. Lamb painfully explains to Cecilia that his magic was completely neutralized by Aogiri, who stands nearby calmly smoking his pipe. Lamb's voiceover explains that the reason Aori is feared as the strongest lies in the unique, specialized sorcery he personally developed to neutralize other mages.
Aogiri's formidable spell completely shatters and seals away all nearby magical energy, rendering any kind of magic totally unusable for those caught within its range. In a world where magic is used for everything from daily tasks to grand-scale warfare, mages proficient in spellcasting hold an absolute advantage over their enemies. Because of his terrifying ability to completely seal and negate all magical powers, Aogiri is widely feared and celebrated as the strongest mage alive. Staring at the formidable mage in disbelief, Cecilia trembles as she realizes she never imagined encountering someone as dangerous as Aogiri so soon in her journey. Gritting his teeth, Lam places his hand on the grass and desperately urges Cecilia to escape while she still can. Supporting the injured knight, Cecilia helps Lam stand up, but Lam insists that she must flee immediately to report this dire situation to Lord Leon. Lam reasons that since Vest used this secret passage, he must have somehow managed to convince the villagers to assist him. Despite his severe injuries, Lam draws his sword with a fierce expression, declaring that he will fulfill his responsibility to protect her at all costs. Applauding mockingly, Aogiri smiles widely and expresses amusement that Lam is still able to stand on sheer willpower alone. Clenching his jaw in frustration, the battered knight glares at the mocking mage, furiously telling him to stop making a joke of their struggle. Preparing a deadly sphere of magical energy, Aogiri smiles coldly and apologizes, stating that killing them is simply his job and it is time for them to make their exit. Sensing his impending defeat, Lam mentally apologizes to Lord Leon, realizing that he has reached his absolute limit. Suddenly, the sound of rushing footsteps echoes through the clearing, catching Lam completely off guard. To Lam's utter shock, Cecilia boldly steps in front of him, wielding a sword in both hands to shield him from the mages. Staring in absolute disbelief at her protective stance, Lam frantically asks Cecilia what on earth she thinks she is doing. Tears welling in her eyes, Cecilia resolutely declares that she will protect him and buy enough time until Leon arrives to save them. Lam desperately grabs her shoulder, shouting in frustration and asking what she could possibly hope to accomplish, asking if she has a death wish. Tears streaming down her face, Cecilia screams back passionately, crying out that she doesn't want to die. With fierce determination shining through her tears, Cecilia yells that she wants to live even more, leaving Lam wide-eyed and speechless. In the quiet depths of the forest, the secret passage stands empty as the confrontation reaches a critical turning point. Walking ahead, Lord Vest stops in his tracks as he overhears Cecilia's passionate outcry from behind him. Sweat dripping down his face, Lam can only watch in stunned silence as the defenseless woman stands firmly before the enemy. Looking back with a gentle, tearful smile amidst falling flower petals, Cecilia softly asks Lam if he could finally start trusting her now. A tense silence falls over the clearing as Aogiri and Lord Vest stare at Cecilia in quiet contemplation. Turning to Lord Vest, Aogiri inquires about Cecilia's mention of the secret passage, asking how she could possibly know about its existence. Lord Vest glares at Cecilia with a cold, suspicious expression, stating that he had suspected it all along, but she truly is a meddling witch. Vest looks at Cecilia standing protectively in front of the wounded knight, realizing that she was the one who incited the villagers to revolt against him. Stepping forward and placing a hand on Aogiri's chest to hold him back, Lord Vest declares that he has seen enough and will personally deal with Cecilia. Pointing his weapon at her, Lord Vest mocks Cecilia's amateurish stance and grip, sneering that he will show her the consequences of her foolish defiance. Charging forward with his sword raised, Lord Vest roars in fury, swearing to show her what happens when worthless scum like her dares to stand against him. With a loud clash of steel, Lord Vest's heavy blade collides violently with Cecilia's sword as she desperately tries to parry his strike. Cecilia groans in pain as the sheer force of Lord Vest's attack strains her arms, making her realize just how outmatched she is in physical combat. Seizing an opening in her defenses, Lord Vest delivers a swift, brutal kick directly to Cecilia's chest. Sent flying backward by the powerful kick, Cecilia screams in pain as she crashes hard onto the grassy ground, her sword slipping from her grasp. Before Cecilia can recover, Lord Vest lunges forward, reaching out with his hand to seize her. With a ruthless grip, Lord Vest grabs Cecilia tightly by the collar of her shirt, choking her as she gasps for air. Lifting her off her feet, Lord Vest glares down at Cecilia with absolute malice, shaking her as he fumes over how she dared to underestimate him. Watching the horrifying sight from the ground, Lam screams out Cecilia's name in sheer panic and helplessness. Looking down at the struggling woman with disgust, Lord Vest mutters about why commoners are always so foolishly stupid, calling her an absolute eyesore. Lord Vest's mind flashes back to past rebellions, recalling how incompetent fools always mistakenly think they can change things by meddling, only to be brutally corrected by his forces. He remembers how those foolish peasants would eventually realize the sheer stupidity of their actions, admitting that watching their faces fill with deep regret was always a satisfying sight. Gripping Cecilia tightly by the collar, Lord Vest mockingly questions her situation, looking down at her with absolute disdain. Lord Vest screams in a fit of rage, telling Cecilia she will deeply regret defying him with her foolish revolution and demanding she beg for forgiveness. Despite being badly bruised and battered, Cecilia gasps out in quiet defiance, resolutely stating that she will not regret her actions. Stunned by her response, Lord Vest stares in disbelief as Cecilia musters her remaining strength to declare that she will never feel any regret. In a brief flashback, Cecilia recalls the passionate faces of the townspeople as they overcame their fears and raised their voices together in rebellion. Cecilia screams passionately at Lord Vest, declaring that she will never forgive a corrupt noble like him who only knows how to take from others. Lord Vest's eyes glow with a cold, murderous intent as he ominously declares that he will kill her right there on the spot. Cecilia gasps in horror as she stares up closely at the terrifying, murderous expression of the corrupt lord looming over her. In his mind, Lord Vest sinisterly envisions hanging Cecilia's head before the rebellious commoners, believing it will completely break their spirits once and for all. From the ground, the injured lamb screams out Cecilia's name in sheer panic and desperation, helpless to save her. Raising his sword high above his head, Lord Vest proclaims that Cecilia's ridiculous ideals and resolve will end right there. With a sudden, dramatic visual effect, a powerful strike echoes through the clearing as a weapon collides to block the attack. Lord Vest's eyes widen in absolute shock as his blade is suddenly deflected, leaving him completely off balance. Staring up in disbelief, Cecilia looks at the figure who has suddenly stepped in to shield her from the deadly strike. Wielding a dark, red-edged sword, Leon stands protectively in front of Cecilia, who gasps out his name in pure relief. Turning back slightly, Leon prepares to face the enemy, his dark cloak billowing in the wind. Leon looks back at the tearful, bruised Cecilia and gently apologizes for keeping her waiting. Looking down at her with a calm yet reassuring expression, Leon softly calls her name. Leon stands firmly before the kneeling Cecilia, commending her courage and telling her that she held out incredibly well. Overcome with emotion and relief, Cecilia sheds tears as she looks up at her savior, whispering his name. Behind them, Leon's reinforcement knights quickly arrive at the scene to help the injured, while Leon stands guard in front of Cecilia. With a cold and focused expression, Leon commands the others to stay back as he prepares to handle the confrontation. Lord Vest sneers in annoyance, mocking Leon's arrival and sarcastically asking if he is trying to play the role of some kind of savior. A sinister grin spreads across Lord Vest's face as he tells Leon that despite showing up, he doesn't stand a chance. Raising his arms, Lord Vest mocks Leon by his hair color, loudly addressing him as the black-haired Leon, while his soldiers aim their crossbows forward. Cecilia gasps in shock and worry, looking up at Leon as the enemy prepares to attack. Lord Vest continues his verbal abuse, declaring that Leon is a total failure because he doesn't possess a single shred of magical power. An illustrative scene explains that the stronger a person's magic is, the more vivid their hair color becomes, showcasing individuals with brilliant red, gold, and blue hair. In contrast, those born without any magical power are shown with common, dull brown or black hair. Pointing a mocking finger, Lord Vest laughs and tells Leon that his hair is black because he is an absolute failure without any magic. Lord Vest recalls a past memory of Leon in the castle, fuming with jealousy over how someone without magic could act so high and mighty. Lord Vest screams with absolute rage, swearing to make Leon regret picking a fight with him and ordering his soldiers to burn him to ashes. The crossbowmen unleash a volley of blazing, flaming arrows directly toward the defenseless Leon. With lightning-fast reflexes, Leon swings his sword, easily slicing through the incoming fireballs in a display of incredible swordsmanship. Lord Vest's mocking expression completely vanishes, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment and shock. Confused and panicking, Lord Vest demands to know if Awagiri has somehow undone the magic neutralizing spell. Smiling calmly, Oyogiri shrugs his shoulders and indicates that he did no such thing, leaving the magic neutralizing field fully active. Clenching his teeth in frustration, Lord Vest furiously demands to know what on earth his soldiers are doing. One of the crossbowmen loads another high-powered flaming arrow and fires, but Leon swiftly evades the attack, closing the distance in the blink of an eye. With a powerful, clean slash, Leon slices the soldier's crossbow completely in half, leaving the attacker gasping in shock. Leon stands calmly amidst the scattered fireballs as they harmlessly dissipate around his imposing figure. In a series of rapid movements, Leon cleanly disarms and defeats the other crossbowmen with effortless sword strikes. Lord Vest stammers in complete terror and confusion, utterly unable to comprehend how Leon is easily neutralizing his forces. Lord Vest stares at Leon's glowing sword in disbelief, wondering how every spell is being deflected when Leon is supposed to be unable to use magic.
The story transitions to a flashback of young Leon and his red-haired sister Bella in a grand mansion, as a butler presents letters containing an invitation from the king.
The narration explains that long ago, 3 legendary great magicians saved the kingdom from a massive crisis. In honor of their heroic achievements, the king granted them the highest nobility rank, giving rise to the 3 great magician houses of the kingdom. The tradition dictated that when a child of these great houses turned 10, they were invited to the castle to receive a gift, which in modern times serves as proof of heirship. The flashback continues as young Leon receives his invitation, explaining that since he was born just a year after his sister Bella, he was also invited to the castle. As young Leon diligently practices his swordsmanship in the garden, Bella watches him silently from behind a pillar. Practicing in the mansion's courtyard, young Leon is surprised when his sister Bella walks up behind him with a gentle smile, telling him how hard he is working again today. Leon and Bella sit side by side on the stone steps of the garden, enjoying a quiet moment together under the clear sky. Bella asks Leon if he has decided what he will ask the king for, prompting Leon to ask in return if she is going to ask for the proof of heirship.
Bella looks back with a bright, confident expression and confirms that receiving the proof of heirship is indeed her plan.
Leon looks down somberly, feeling a deep sense of uncertainty about his own worth compared to his talented sister. Hanging his head, young Leon quietly confesses that he has no idea what he should ask the king for. Leon looks down at his hands, thinking about how he cannot use magic like his red-haired sister can, while his own hair is a plain, magicless black. Staring at his reflection, Leon somberly notes that because his hair is black, there is nothing he can do. Leon dejectedly mutters that he has no real worth, while Bella looks on in silent concern. Reaching out with a warm smile, Bella gently pats Leon on the head to comfort him. Bella steps forward and explains to Leon that while it is true that people with red hair are born with strong magic, there is more to a person than that. Turning away slightly, Bella softly tells Leon that she has never once looked at him as someone who is lesser just because he cannot use magic. Stunned by her unexpected words, young Leon looks up at his sister in surprise. Bella turns back with a radiant, joyful smile, framed by bright yellow sunflowers under the sun. Bella tells Leon to never say something so incredibly sad again, reiterating that he has immense worth. Looking gently at Leon, Bella reminds him that he is kind, and that is why he always wants to help and protect others. Reaching out to him, Bella reassures Leon that she is absolutely certain those warm feelings of his will reach everyone someday. In a vision of the future, Leon is shown clad in dark armor wielding a black sword as Bella explains that he trains so hard in swordsmanship because he wants to protect people. Bella opens her arms wide with a bright smile, declaring her dream to make everyone happy together. Overwhelmed by his sister's kindness and grand dream, young Leon stares at her in silent awe. Bella turns around with a playful, determined stance, enthusiastically clenching her fists as she says there are so many things she wants to do together with him. Bella leans in with a wide, bright grin, playfully urging Leon not to make such a gloomy face anymore. Staring at his sister's smiling face, young Leon is deeply moved, his doubts beginning to melt away. A scenic transition of pure white flowers bathed in soft sunlight captures the shifting of time. The scene transitions to the Grand Palace, where the king sits on his throne and addresses the kneeling young Leon, commanding him to state his desire. Leon lowers his head in deep respect, steeling his resolve before speaking to the king. Kneeling proudly before the entire court, Leon firmly requests to be granted the legendary Sword of the Voidstone. The gathered nobles begin whispering in shock and confusion, questioning why a boy who cannot even use magic would ask for such a weapon. Holding his chin thoughtfully, the king acknowledges Leon's request, noting that the sword passed down through the royal family is indeed the most durable blade in the world. A majestic illustration shows the dark, red-gemmed sword on a crimson cushion as the king explains that the Voidstone rejects all magic, making its power the greatest among all swords. The king adds a warning, explaining that the sword is incredibly heavy and rejects magic, which is why no one in history has ever been able to truly wield it. Undeterred, young Leon closes his eyes and quietly states that he understands the risks. Standing in her elegant red dress, Bella watches her brother with pride as Leon resolves in his heart to become stronger with the sword than anyone else. Leon looks up with absolute determination, silently asking his sister to watch him as he takes on this path. With a fierce and unwavering gaze, young Leon vows that he will master the Sword of the Voidstone no matter what. The flashback ends, transitioning back to the grand mansion of the Morganite family under a bright blue sky. Now a teenager, Leon practices his sword swings in the courtyard, the blade cutting sharply through the air with a loud whoosh. Leon pauses to catch his breath, sweat dripping from his face as the grueling physical training takes its toll. Looking down at his hands, Leon's frustration grows as he thinks about how it has been quite some time since he received the sword, yet he still cannot wield it properly.
The Sword of the Void Stone is shown, a weapon forged from the legendary material known for being completely magic-resistant and unmatched in hardness. Leon wiping the sweat from his forehead, noting with frustration how incredibly heavy the legendary blade actually is. Leon grits his teeth, realizing that in order to truly wield a sword of this magnitude, he needs to build an immense amount of physical strength. Raising his sword high with absolute focus, Leon reminds himself that there are only a few years left before his sister becomes the head of the family. Grabbing the hilt with a powerful grip, Leon resolves to push his limits and show everyone that he is capable of wielding the heavy blade. Bringing the sword down with a mighty swing, Leon unleashes a powerful strike that cleanly shatters a massive boulder in the courtyard. The other trainees and knights in the courtyard cheer in absolute shock and admiration, amazed that Leon has actually managed to swing the heavy sword with such force. The knights stop cheering and look on in confusion as Leon silently prepares for his next move without celebrating. Leon looks down at his hands gripping the hilt, noting to himself that this legendary sword is actually meant to be wielded with only a single hand. Recognizing how far he still has to go, Leon realizes he must become vastly stronger to maximize the weapon's true power. One of the trainees looks at Leon in bewilderment, asking why he is training so brutally when he doesn't even have to go to the dangerous front lines. A man with no magical powers stands on the front lines as the strongest commander. Leon stands silently, holding his sword from behind as he gazes up at the clear sky. Leon turns back slightly and offers a warm, confident smile to those behind him. The trainees cheer in unison, shouting enthusiastically that Leon is absolutely correct. Leon and the trainees gathered together in the courtyard, chatting and enjoying their time after training. The story transitions back to the present, where Leon stands victoriously, pointing his sword at Lord Vest, who lies defeated on the ground. Leon's allies look on from a short distance, keeping a close eye on the confrontation. Leon looks down coldly, telling the defeated Lord Vest that he might not be aware of what has happened. Leon informs Lord Vest that his forces are already gone, prompting the terrified Lord to demand how someone like him could be so strong. Refusing to accept reality, Lord Vest desperately accuses Leon of using black magic or some other underhanded method. Leon gazes down at the panicked Lord with a calm, unimpressed silence. Terrified and desperate, Lord Vest screams out to Aogiri, furiously commanding him to kill everyone right away. Lord Vest tries to maintain a manic, desperate smile as he lies helpless on the grassy ground. Lord Vest frantically screams at Aogiri to kill them, even promising to increase his pay as Aogiri stands by calmly. Aogiri thoughtfully taps his chin as he listens to Lord Vest's desperate pleas. With a smug smile, Aogiri flatly refuses, declaring that he has no desire to help. Lord Vest is left completely stunned, staring up in utter disbelief and asking why. Turning around slightly, Aogiri calmly states that if he had to give a reason for his refusal, leaning in close to the terrified Lord, Aogiri coldly declares that he is simply completely sick and tired of him. Lord Vest stammers in terror, asking if Aogiri wasn't dispatched from Topazolite to aid him. Walking away, Aogiri casually responds that while that might be true, he has simply changed his mind. Aogiri dramatically fake weeps, complaining about how incredibly boring it has been to be around Lord Vest. Aogiri explains that he had wondered if Lord Vest would be an interesting person, only to find a disappointing individual driven entirely by an inferiority complex. Turning around with a bright smile, Aogiri dramatically declares that someone else is quite different. Aogiri turns his attention to the anxious blue-haired girl, asking if her name is Cecilia. Aogiri offers a warm and polite smile, placing his hand gently over his heart. Cecilia is taken aback, stammering in shock at the sudden suggestion of getting along. Aogiri smilingly declares his desire to become a part of their revolutionary army. The green-haired youth steps forward protectively, loudly questioning how they can trust someone they were fighting just moments ago. Aogiri's friendly expression vanishes as he coldly tells the youth to shut up, clarifying that he is only asking Cecilia. Aogiri playfully wonders if he seems too suspicious, before gesturing that he will prove his intentions. Snapping his fingers, Aogiri asks if they would trust him if he did this, as a purple magic circle appears under the screaming Lord Vest. A bright, blinding flash of light erupts as Lord Vest screams in terror, leaving Leon and his companions watching in absolute shock. A comical chubby mouse with a tuft of gray hair falls helplessly through the air. The green-haired youth stares in complete disbelief, screaming out in shock that Lord Vest has been turned into a mouse. Holding the struggling mouse by its tail, Aogiri summons a golden cage and decides to keep him in this form for a while. Locked inside the golden cage, the transformed Lord Vest squeaks desperately, begging to be let out. Aogiri casually tells Leon that although he could easily take them all on, he simply isn't in the mood to do so. Showing off the cage, Aogiri explains that he is willing to cooperate with them solely because they are friends with Cecilia. Aogiri confidently asks if they can deny his strength, admitting it might sound bold coming from his own mouth.
Aogiri notes that Cecilia is the only one among them who can use magic properly, causing the nearby knights to sweat nervously. Aogiri playfully wonders if he should just transfer his services to the royal capital instead. The narrative internal monologue notes that in the original plot, Aogiri was never supposed to become allies with Cecilia. In the original timeline, Aogiri was a dangerous enemy who fought Cecilia and Charles, ultimately being defeated and disappearing after a fierce magical battle. He had remained a mysterious antagonist, never truly understanding Cecilia to the very end. The monologue explains that if they refuse Aogiri's proposal now, he will flee to the royal capital, and the revolution will ultimately end in absolute failure. Cecilia looks deeply troubled, sweating as she desperately wonders what she should do in this critical moment. Staring at Aogiri's enigmatic smile framed by a dark purple aura, Cecilia silently wonders what his true intentions are in wanting to become their ally. Realizing that rejecting his proposal means he will escape to the capital and doom the revolution, Cecilia remains trapped in a state of intense worry. Suddenly, Cecilia and her ally look up in surprise, calling out to Lord Leon as something unexpected catches their attention. With a bright, theatrical smile, Aogiri exclaims that he is truly glad to see that they are being so reasonable. Extending his hand toward the young commander, Aogiri cheerfully declares that he is looking forward to working with Leon from now on. Leaning in close with a knowing smile, Aogiri reminds Leon that he will need his permission if he hopes to stay by Cecilia's side. Sweat dripping down her face, Cecilia looks anxiously toward Leon to see how he will react to Aogiri's unexpected proposal. Leon stares back with a cold, analytical gaze, quietly assessing the mysterious magician's true motives. Reflecting on the purple magical aura Aogiri summoned earlier, Leon recognizes that his incredible power is undeniably real and decides to utilize whatever help he can get. Smiling politely, Aogiri offers his hand to Lamb, hoping they can get along, prompting the injured green-haired youth to angrily snap back that he still does not approve of him. Raising his gloved hand, Leon commands his forces to pull back, noting that many are injured and they must regroup before heading to Annabelle Onyx. Carrying Lord Vest's golden cage with a cheerful smile, Aogiri walks alongside Lamb, who fumes with irritation and shouts that he can walk perfectly fine on his own. Looking back at his commander, Lamb states that he will head to the carriage first, receiving a quiet nod of approval from Liam. Cecilia is taken aback, turning around in surprise as her name is quietly called. Blushing deeply and rubbing the back of his neck, Lamb shyly looks away while quietly offering Cecilia his sincere gratitude. Hearing his soft words of thanks, Cecilia responds with a warm, relieved smile. Standing in the middle of the lush green forest path, Cecilia quietly watches as Aogiri, Lamb, and the rest of the soldiers head back toward the carriages. Leon pauses and turns back to look at Cecilia, noticing the lingering exhaustion and worry on her face. Looking down at the blue crest on her hand, Cecilia remembers how the mark had glowed during the battle, wondering if it reacted because she is in the saint's body. Cecilia gazes at her hand in contemplation, realizing that her quick actions are the only reason Lord Vest was captured and her allies were kept safe. Surrounded by a beautiful backdrop of blooming white roses, Leon looks at Cecilia with a soft, exceptionally gentle smile. Flushing slightly, Cecilia humbly replies that she was only performing her duty as a saint, promising to keep working hard to free everyone from tyranny. Smiling brightly, Cecilia urges Leon that they should hurry back to the barracks to share the triumphant news of Lord Vest's capture. Suddenly, Cecilia's cheerful expression falters as large tears begin to well up in her bright blue eyes. Leon looks on in shock and concern, gently calling out her name as he notices her sudden change in emotion. Tears stream down Cecilia's face as she covers her mouth, weeping quietly and admitting that for some reason she cannot stop crying. A painful flashback shows her past self being choked by Charles and later lying lifeless in a pool of blood, recalling how terrified she had been of dying. The memories of her past life fuel her determination as she grips her sword, desperately resolving never to lose anyone precious to her again. Seeing the cheers of the liberated citizens in her mind, Cecilia feels a profound sense of relief that she was successfully able to protect everyone's future. Overwhelmed by the raw emotion of having survived and succeeded, Cecilia breaks down into heavy, sobbing tears. Leon's eyes widen in absolute stun and disbelief as he witnesses the young saint crying so helplessly before him. Softening his expression, Leon quietly acknowledges her incredible bravery, realizing the immense weight she has been carrying. Wiping her tears, Cecilia tries to compose herself, while Leon notes to himself that despite her undeniable magical talent, she clearly has no real combat experience. Looking down thoughtfully, Leon wonders how a girl who was just a simple villager a few days ago managed to protect Lamb and face Lord Vest all on her own. Leon places his gloved hand gently on Cecilia's shoulder,
deeply curious about what could possibly drive her to push herself so far. Cecilia looks up at him with tear-filled eyes, startled by his sudden gentle touch. Standing close to her in a warm embrace of pink roses, Leon gazes down at Cecilia, realizing he deeply desires to learn more about her. Reaching up to his collar, Leon quietly unclasps his heavy black commander's cloak. Drape-folding his warm cloak over Cecilia's shoulders, Leon gently instructs her that she needs to take much better care of herself. Looking directly into her eyes with a solemn expression, Leon firmly tells her that achieving their goals means absolutely nothing if she dies in the process. Wrapping the large cloak tightly around herself, Cecilia stares up at Leon in breathless surprise, whispering his name. Leon begins walking ahead, and Cecilia follows closely behind, holding his cloak around her shoulders with a soft, comforted smile. Looking up at the clear, brilliant blue sky, Cecilia quietly reflects on the unexpected warmth and kindness she has found in this world. The scene transitions to a magnificent sunlit palace balcony where a lavish tea party is spread out as a voice gossips about Lord Vest's sudden capture. Holding a delicate teacup with purple manicured nails, an elegant noblewoman notes that it appears Leon will be returning very soon. Hearing the news, a beautiful young girl with silver hair and lavender eyes pauses mid-bite, looking up in sheer surprise. Pouting comically, the chibi silver-haired girl complains about the chocolate cake, dramatically crying that they won't be able to enjoy these delicious sweets together anymore. Looking across the table, the silver-haired girl curiously asks how she could possibly know that, holding her fork as she listens. Under the shade of green trees, Leon and Cecilia walk side by side as white birds flutter around them, with a shadow watching them from the bushes. A close-up reveals a smug, beautiful, blonde-haired woman with painted purple nails resting her chin on her hand as she smiles mysteriously. The silver-haired girl tilts her head in utter confusion, raising a questioning eyebrow at the woman's cryptic words. The elegant woman stands up from the table, announcing that she will soon be returning to her own territory. Hearing this, the silver-haired girl clasps her hands together and beams with absolute delight, surrounded by a lovely frame of pink roses. An aerial view of a bustling cobblestone town square with a wooden stage in the center, where townsfolk are gathered. The narration notes that the people freed from his tyranny began to live their lives once again. The narration explains that they are also staying there for the time being, supporting each other, as Cecilia waves happily to the smiling villagers. Leon turns to Cecilia and says, "They should be fine for a while, Cecilia." Leon instructs her, "Come to my room later," prompting Cecilia to respond in surprise, "Ah?" Leon continues, about the current state of the kingdom. Sitting across from Leon at a table inside his room, Cecilia silently thinks to herself that she can finally find out what this kingdom is really like. To sort out the differences from the current situation, Cecilia thinks that she must first recall the plot of the novel. The narration explains that in Ame's novel, A Saint for Whom, science doesn't exist, as flasks of magical potions spill glowing liquid against a dark backdrop. The narration notes that people use magic in their daily lives and live in total prosperity, showing a woman watering plants with magic and a scholar studying a magical tone. The narration explains that even among them, there were 3 major noble families that held exceptionally high status, showing 3 crests, blue, red, and yellow. The narration introduces the lapis lazuli family, which is the family Charles was born into and excels in healing magic. The narration introduces the Morganite family, which is the family Leon and Bella belong to and excels in offensive magic. The narration introduces the Topolozolite family, noting they excel in alchemy, and Diego, the mastermind who controlled the corrupt nobles, is there. Chibi Cecilia reflects on how their ancestors were the 3 mages who helped the king at the time, remembering that she also saw Leon's past in it. The narration explains that Cecilia collaborated with Charles and various other companions to defeat the corrupt nobles in the Topazolite family, which was the original story. Leon rests his hands on his lap and notes that this kingdom has changed drastically since the ruler changed. Leon explains that, first of all, the lapis lazuli family has completely fallen. Leon explains that not only did the next head of the family, Charles, go missing a year ago, but the other day, by the new ruler's order, everyone in the lapis lazuli family was arrested, meaning that family is as good as gone now. Cecilia is shocked, wondering if Charles went missing a year ago and if the novel's plot has been changing since then. Leon explains that with the downfall of the lapis lazuli family, the corrupt nobles who were allied with the Topazolite family have started making their moves. Cecilia listens intently and responds, "I see." Leon explains that in all the territories they currently govern, they've banned other nobles from entering and have completely isolated themselves. On top of that, they dispatched their greatest fighting force, Augiri, to Vest's estate instead of keeping him close, repeating these mysterious actions. Cecilia looks deeply concerned, wondering why they aren't ruling the royal capital, as context is completely different from the novel, and silently asks who exactly is the new ruler. Leon notes that an official notice was sent out 6 months ago, causing Cecilia to nervously stammer in response. Leon reveals with a grave expression that the new ruler is Bella Morganite. Cecilia is shocked, thinking of Bella as a fiery silhouette of a red-haired woman appears behind her. The narration explains that in the novel, she was an important allied character connected to the awakening of Cecilia's magic, making Cecilia wonder why she is now the ruler. Leon continues, explaining that she destroyed numerous places like her village, imprisoned the captured people in the royal capital, and is trying to unilaterally massacre everyone in the Topazolite family. Dark red and white roses bloom against a dark, thorny background, conveying a tense and ominous atmosphere. Cecilia is in disbelief, thinking that Bella was supposed to be a kind person who supported Leon during his childhood, wondering if she's being manipulated or if the plot changed. Cecilia grits her teeth, resolved that it is certain something happened to Bella in the past and that she must look into it.
Cecilia looks up determinedly and asks Leon if there was a specific moment when Bella's personality changed.
Cecilia presses further, finding it hard to believe his own sister would think this, asking if there was anything at all, no matter how small.
Leon places a hand to his chin, reflecting that there was indeed one incomprehensible incident.
Leon remembers a messenger running in frantically, reporting that she suddenly collapsed in her room 2 days ago. The messenger added that although she regained consciousness, the doctor said she was suffering from severe memory loss, which left Leon shocked and angry. Leon is shown rushing down a palace hallway, shouting in desperation for his sister. Bella sits up in her bed and looks at him in confusion, asking, "Leon?" Leon approaches her bedside and asks if she is all right after losing her memory, to which Bella calmly replies that she is fine. Leon notices a paper on the nightstand with handwritten foreign characters, wondering if she started studying foreign languages to prepare for diplomacy. Bella smiles nervously and replies that she was just taking notes on a novel's plot, leaving Leon surprised. Cecilia gasps in shock as she processes Leon's words about the severe memory loss in the foreign characters. Looking shocked, Cecilia wonders if someone could have entered Bella's body, just like how she became Cecilia. Cecilia trembles as she wonders why Bella was taking notes on a novel's plot and how she knew Leon, since no one other than Aim and herself should have known. Cecilia's internal monologue continues, realizing there were indeed other people who knew about this novel. Cecilia recalls Akari and her classmates in high school, thinking that if one of the members of the group who stole Ame's notebook is Bella's true identity, then the current situation makes sense. Memories of her past life with Ame show them working together at school, fueling Cecilia's determination never to forgive this intrusion into the world they created. Gripping her hand in anger, Cecilia resolves that she needs to uncover Bella's true identity. Looking determinedly into the distance, Cecilia resolves that she must stop the mastermind inside Bella no matter what. Leon turns to Cecilia and says, "I want to put an end to my sister's unreasonable policies." Clenching his hands tightly, Leon continues, "I want to stop the chaos in this kingdom, but more than anything," Leon recalls how Bella suddenly started attacking the royal capital without even consulting him, though he is certain she is dealing with something she cannot tell anyone. Looking at Cecilia with deep sincerity, Leon asks, "Please continue to lend me your help." Cecilia gasps in shock, her heart pounding as she stares at Leon with wide, emotional eyes. Leon gazes back at her, surprised by the intensity of her reaction. Cecilia silently reflects on how the sister who once taught Leon how to live has now run completely out of control. Leon looks down at Cecilia determinedly and says, "And together, let's change this situation." After taking a bath, Cecilia walks down the hallway in her nightgown, thinking about how they spent so much time discussing their future plans that it got incredibly late. Cecilia breaks down their next strategic moves for the revolution, capturing Annabelle, capturing Diego, and persuading Bella. As Cecilia walks down the dark corridor, a voice suddenly calls out from the shadows, "Cecilia." Surprised, Cecilia turns around in confusion to see who is calling her. Cecilia shrieks in absolute shock as she turns to find a long-haired man standing completely naked before her. A blushing, chibi Cecilia furiously screams, "Why are you naked?" To which the man casually waves his hand and replies, "It's just a habit." Cecilia's sweat drops in exasperation, muttering to herself, "What kind of habit is that?" The man steps closer and gently assures her, "I can definitely be of help to you." Cecilia's eyes light up as she realizes, "That's right, if I use Ayogiri's magic," and eagerly turns back to him to ask for a favor. Suddenly, a sharp red slash cuts through the air, startling Cecilia mid-sentence. Before she can react, the man suddenly pins Cecilia down onto a bed, leaving her completely stunned and confused. As she is held down, Cecilia looks around in panic, wondering where they are since they are no longer in the hallway. Smiling down at her with a sinister, purple-eyed gaze, the man whispers her name and says, "Just as I thought, you..." Leaning in close, he smugly says, "Claiming you could use magic? That was a lie, wasn't it?" He repeats his accusation with a chilling grin. "Miss Cecilia, just as I thought, your claim that you can use magic is a lie, isn't it?"
Cecilia gasps in sheer terror as she realizes her secret has been completely uncovered. The man recalls observing that while she possesses strong magical power within her body, she cannot actually wield it. Cecilia is struck by dread as she realizes that he knows she cannot use magic. Cecilia tries to struggle, demanding to know his intentions and asking, "Are you trying to kill me?" Gently holding a lock of her blue hair, the man reassures her, "Please rest assured, I have absolutely no intention of killing you." With a dark, sadistic expression, he whispers, "What I want to see is the sight of a person's heart breaking apart." He explains that he has witnessed it countless times before, proud magic users with absolute confidence in their powers becoming utterly broken in both mind and body. With a sinister smile, he declares, "Because anyone who can use magic is arrogant, you see. All I want is to destroy their pride along with their precious magic." He mockingly recalls how his past victims would desperately struggle to run away, calling their suffering truly comical. Staring down at the trembling Cecilia, he says, "But you are different from those people. You possess powerful magical energy, but since you can't use magic, you're just an ordinary person." He continues, "The gap in power between us was as obvious as staring into a blaze, but you didn't abandon your comrades and run away." He ecstatically praises the sight of her protecting her comrades so devotedly, while Cecilia groans in pain and disgust. His face darkens into an ominous shadow as he declares, "I want to break you." Suddenly, a swirling vortex of purple magic surrounds Cecilia, leaving her confused and startled. Cecilia's eyes widen in absolute shock as she sees a vision of a girl in a Japanese school uniform appearing behind the man. The man explains, "Cecilia, the spell I am casting on you is one that forces you to confess your innermost desires. Right now, I must appear to you as the person you most want to see." He commands, "Cecilia, what is your true purpose? Is your goal to ingratiate yourself with Leon Morganite, or do you have a personal grudge against the nobles?" The spell takes hold of Cecilia, and the man commands, "Now then, show me your true desires." The man suddenly pauses in confusion as Cecilia's reaction is not what he expected. Tears stream down Cecilia's face as she softly but resolutely whispers, under the spell, "I will protect you." The man is taken aback, wondering, "Who exactly are you?" as a sudden, hostile presence interrupts them. A cold, commanding voice echoes out of the darkness, warning, "Don't move." Leon stands over the man with his sword drawn, threatening, "If you move even a little, I'll slice you in half." The purple-haired man smiles playfully despite the blade at his throat, saying, "Oh dear, you've found me already, haven't you?" Charles charges into the room, shouting, "Get away from Cecilia. I saw you suddenly disappear from the hallway. As I thought, you cannot be trusted." Charles points his sword and urges, "Lord Leon, let's capture this man." To which the man calmly scoffs, "Capture me? It's useless, you know that, right?" With a mocking smile, the man opens his robe and says, "Well, if you want to try, be my guest." Leon supports a weak Cecilia in her bed and asks, "Cecilia, can you recognize me?" While Charles stands nearby looking extremely worried. Cecilia looks up with a pale, exhausted expression and weakly whispers, "Leon." Leon looks down at Cecilia with a deeply concerned and solemn expression. Standing before them in his white robe, Iori smiles and says, "It seems I underestimated you. I will apologize." Leon turns his head away coldly, replying, "With what do you intend to apologize? Do you think a mere verbal apology will suffice?" Glaring back with intense, menacing anger, Leon warns, "Right here, right now, I could cut off your head, and it would be justified." Sweating nervously under Leon's fierce gaze, Aogiri smiles sheepishly and says, "Right, I suppose I did go a bit too far." Aogiri looks at them more sincerely and promises, "I don't know if this will serve as a token of my apology, but from now on, I will respond not only to Cecilia's requests, but to yours as well." Charles points aggressively at Aoyogiri, shouting, "That's only natural. You mean you had no intention of doing so until now?" To which Aoyogiri calmly replies, "Yes." Smiling with closed eyes, Aoyori notes, "The magical defense aspect was a point of concern." He then lets out a puzzled, Aogiri's sweat drops as Leon suggests applying the defense enchantment to their gear, asking, "Of everyone's cloaks and armor?" Leon reassures him, "Don't worry, I don't have that many subordinates." Leon looks down with a stern, imposing gaze, declaring, "I'll need you to reinforce about 5 items per person, but a promise is a promise, so I can count on you, right, Aogiri?" In a comical chibi scene, Aogi frantically protests, "Are you trying to pawn off such a boring job on me?" While Charles complains, "That's too much," and Leon bluntly commands, "Just go and get it done, right now." Cecilia's sweat drops in dismay as she imagines a comical scene of Aogi buried under a massive pile of heavy metal armor, whimpering, "Eep!" Cecilia looks off to the side with a worried, sweating expression as she contemplates their situation. Standing by her bed in his open robe, Aogiri offers, "As another part of my apology, let me give you a piece of advice." Against a dark and ominous background, Aogiri's warning echoes. The head of the Topazolite family? I think you will eventually end up fighting that person, but you should assume that all of your actions are an open book to him. Cecilia looks back at him in sheer disbelief and shock, muttering, "Huh?" Charles stands nearby with a quiet, observant expression as Cecilia processes the chilling warning. Lying in bed with Charles standing at her side, Cecilia is consumed by worry, thinking, my actions being an open book? What on earth does that mean? If that's really true, what should I, when Charles gently calls out, Cecilia? Cecilia snaps out of her thoughts and looks up at Charles, softly saying, thank you. Cecilia resolves to keep her composure, telling herself, that's right, he might have lied to test my heart. For now, let's focus on thinking about Annabelle. Charles looks down silently at Cecilia with a solemn and thoughtful gaze. The entire group gasps in absolute shock, with Cecilia crying out in disbelief, Annabelle is gone? Leon closes his eyes in frustration and explains, apparently she's away on diplomatic duties and is scheduled to return today, but the exact time is unknown. We should have checked in advance using Cecilia's magic. Cecilia laughs nervously to cover up her lack of actual magic, stammering, you're right, no really, while Charles stands beside her with a wide, knowing grin. Leon looks toward the window determinately and decides, and it seems the Onyx family does not suspect us. We'll go to the Onyx estate tomorrow. Walking through the bustling streets of the Onyx territory adorned with floating pink roses, Cecilia observes it's completely different from the Pest territory. There's so many fancy shops. I can tell the Onyx family is putting effort into diplomacy. Cecilia reflects on the dark reality hidden behind the glamour. But this is just a superficial prosperity. The profits gained from diplomacy are never used for the people. She notes how the wealth is hoarded by the elite. They become the property of the Onyx family and the Topazolite family. Even if the town is beautiful, the people here aren't truly wealthy. We have to help them too. Deep in thought, Cecilia tells herself, but Annabelle is different from Pest. She is just walking down the stone streets in her boots. Cecilia thinks, I need to discuss Annabelle with Leon and the others. While walking through the crowded market, Cecilia turns her head in confusion as a mysterious hooded figure in a black cloak passes by her. Catching a glimpse of the green hair beneath the hood, Cecilia gasps in shock. Lamb? Cecilia passes a hooded figure with green hair in the market, thinking to herself, he said he was going to train. Why is he here? Suspicious, Cecilia follows the hooded figure as he slips through a narrow wooden doorway into a building. Watching him from a distance, Cecilia notices how easily he navigates the alleyways, wondering, he seems strangely familiar with this area. I wonder if he's been in Onyx territory before, but that kind of setting wasn't in the novel, I'm sure. Suddenly, a shocking thought crosses Cecilia's mind. Looking at his green hair and guarded expression, she gasps, no way! Lamb, is it you? Are you the traitor? Standing before a grand, glass-roofed building adorned with a large white flower crest, Cecilia watches the hooded figure walk inside, her mind still racing with the terrifying question, Lamb, is it you? Are you the traitor? Approaching the entrance, Cecilia looks up at the glass door and realizes, a clothing shop? Peering inside, Cecilia is bewildered to see the hooded figure standing among the displays, questioning in disbelief, what on earth is he talking about? As the hooded figure walks further into the back room with an attendant, Cecilia panics, thinking, I'm losing sight of him. Opening the heavy double doors of the shop, Cecilia cautiously enters, whispering, it should be okay to go inside, right? Excuse me. Looking around the beautifully decorated shop filled with elegant dresses and fabrics, Cecilia muses, it looks like any other store on the outside, but maybe it's pretending to be a regular shop while conducting deals in the back? Cecilia spots a door at the back and gasps, Lamb, as she hears muffled voices coming from inside. Pressing her ear against the wooden door, Cecilia strains to listen, thinking, I can't hear him very well. Desperate to uncover the truth, Cecilia leans in closer, telling herself, I need to get closer, when suddenly she hears a creak. With a startled exclamation, Cecilia accidentally pushes the door open and slips inside. Startled, the green-haired person inside the room turns around in absolute shock as the door flies open. Standing in a beautiful frilly dark blue dress and a matching beret, Lamb blushes furiously and screams in embarrassment, Cecilia, why are you here? Panicked and sweating, Cecilia frantically tries to explain herself, shouting back, that's what I should be asking you, Lamb. Why are you in a place like this? You were sneaking around, so I thought it was suspicious and followed you. Standing silently in the elegant dark blue dress adorned with bows, Lamb blushes and looks away sheepishly, his usual fierce warrior demeanor completely replaced by embarrassment. Staring at Lamb, Cecilia's eyes sparkle with excitement as she squeals in her head. Cute! So Lamb had a secret like this? Misinterpreting her intense stare, Lamb blushes even harder and shouts defensively, you're making fun of me, aren't you? A man dressing up as a woman? Instantly, Cecilia grabs his hands tightly, holding them close in a reassuring grip and declaring passionately, "That's not true at all." With a bright, genuine smile and flowers blooming in the background, Cecilia reassures him, "I don't think it's weird." Lamb's eyes widen in absolute surprise and relief at her warm, accepting words. A narration box introduces the origin of Lamb's secret, an orphanage located in the Morganite territory. The narration continues, explaining, "This place gathered only boys who had hopes of becoming soldiers in the future. As a young boy, Lamb held a yellow flower, thinking, 'It's cute, maybe I should decorate my room with it.' The narration notes, 'Abandoned by my parents, I was there until a few years ago.' A group of boys from the orphanage approached him mockingly, sneering, 'Hey, Lamb, picking flowers? Doing something girly again? Maybe you're actually a girl, aren't you?' Looking down with a guarded, solemn expression, young Lamb replied coldly, 'It doesn't matter what I like. It's none of your business.' The leader of the bullies pointed at him and yelled furiously, 'With an appearance like that, your enemies will belittle you. You having the desire to become a soldier is a nuisance to us. If you look like that and can't even hold a sword properly, then don't stay here.' Left alone, young Lamb clenched his jaw, his face burning with frustration and shame. Standing by his bedroom window in the pouring rain, young Lamb stared out into the dark night, thinking bitterly, 'Damn it, everyone always judges me based on my appearance.' Looking at his reflection in the wet glass, Lamb resolved, 'I like cute things, but my desire to become a strong soldier is just as strong.' Staring firmly at his own face, Lamb questioned in frustration, 'Why does my appearance need to be rugged and tough?' With burning determination, young Lamb vowed to himself, 'I'll prove to them that appearance doesn't matter.' One day, a commotion arose at the orphanage gates. The boys rushed to see, whispering, 'What's going on? I heard the Morganite family came to look for soldier candidates.' Riding a majestic black horse, young Leon Morganite arrived, looking incredibly dignified. The orphans watched in awe, whispering, 'That's Leon Morganite. They say he's a sword genius. If you can get into the military under him, you'd become the envy of everyone.' While the other boys eagerly declared they would be the ones chosen, young Lamb stood silently in the crowd, staring at Leon with intense determination. Standing before the gathered orphans, Leon's commander ordered, 'Show me your individual abilities,' and the boys began to spar with wooden swords. Young Lamb stepped forward, holding his wooden sword firmly as he prepared to show his worth. Noticing Lamb's striking appearance, Leon thought to himself, 'That boy's vibrant hair color? He might show me his magic.' Stepping forward with a steady gaze, young Lamb declared, 'My name is Lamb.' Looking directly at Leon with fierce, unyielding eyes, Lamb placed a hand on his chest and asked boldly, 'Would you be willing to have a sword sparring match with me?' Leon's eyes widened in absolute shock at the boy's unexpected, bold challenge. Behind him, the other orphans laughed mockingly, sneering, 'What is he saying? That guy's saying something weird again.' Stepping down from his horse, Leon accepted the challenge, stating calmly, 'Very well. That is also one way to demonstrate one's abilities.' The two stood opposite each other in the courtyard, wooden swords in hand as a tense wind swept between them. Lamb charged forward with all his might, but Leon effortlessly blocked his strike, sending Lamb reeling back as he groaned. Gah. Watching from the sidelines, the bullies laughed mockingly, jeering, 'Ha, that guy's getting pushed back. Of course he is. It's obvious it'll be tough for that girly little Lamb.' Leon unleashed a swift, powerful flurry of strikes, his wooden sword moving like a blur as Lamb struggled desperately to keep up. With a final decisive strike, Leon disarmed young Lamb, sending his wooden sword flying into the air as Lamb gasped in shock. Leon stands triumphantly, holding his wooden sword aloft after disarming young Lamb, whose wooden sword clatters onto the stone pavement. In the background, the onlookers watch in shock as one boy boasts, 'See, I told you.' The surrounding boys mock Lamb for his defeat, sneering that he really doesn't know his place, while another gasps in surprise. One of Leon's commanders looks on with an impressed smile, noting that Lamb did incredibly well to last a whole minute against the young master. The three boys who are mocking Lamb are completely dumbfounded and shocked to hear the commander's praise. Dismayed and sweating, the boys frantically excuse Lamb's performance, claiming Leon must have been going easy on a kid, before the leader desperately requests a sparring match of his own to prove himself. A flurry of intense sword-clashing sounds echoes through the bright blue sky as the matches proceed. The three arrogant challengers lie defeated and groaning on the ground. Leon stands calmly above them and notes that in magic-centered battles, those who only rely on raw swordsmanship are at a disadvantage, making mindless training pointless. Leon turns to Lamb, acknowledging his undeniable effort during their clash, but questions why Lamb didn't use any magic despite his striking hair color. Young Lamb looks down somberly, explaining that he has always been ridiculed for his appearance, with others claiming that someone like him isn't fit to hold a sword. With a passionate fire in his green eyes, Lamb declares that he takes pride in who he is, asserting that appearance has nothing to do with what one loves or wishes to become. Clenching his fist, Lamb firmly states that winning only matters to him if he can defeat his opponents on the exact same ground as them. Leon smiles with genuine intrigue, finding Lamb to be an incredibly interesting person.
Leon reaches out his hand to Lamb under the gentle sunlight, inviting him to come and work under his command.
Stunned, young Lamb asks if Leon is truly inviting him to join his army, to which Leon simply and confidently confirms. Leon smiles warmly at Lamb, expressing how much he genuinely likes his character. Overjoyed and deeply moved, young Lamb smiles brightly and reaches back to accept Leon's hand, stating that he understands and accepts. In the present day, Lamb wears a cute dark blue dress and beret, blushing intensely amidst a bed of roses as he shyly thanks Cecilia for her warm praise. Completely captivated by his shy smile, Cecilia's eyes sparkle as she blushes, finding Lamb's gentle expression incredibly adorable. Cecilia warmly apologizes for secretly following him, but Lamb softly assures her that he doesn't mind at all. A small, chibified Iorgi grins mischievously, pointing out that everything turned out this way because of what Leon said. Excitedly exploring the shop, Cecilia holds up a yellow dress and enthusiastically urges Lamb to try it on next, while Lamb blushes happily and admits he was eyeing that one too. Suddenly, a polite voice from behind interrupts their fun, asking if the two of them are tourists visiting the area. Cecilia turns around, her eyes widening in absolute shock as she immediately recognizes the person standing before them. A beautiful young girl with long silver hair and deep purple eyes smiles radiantly under a flurry of cherry blossoms, cheerfully wishing them a good day. The graceful girl is revealed to be none other than Annabelle Onyx. A title card transitions the scene, displaying the title, "I'll Be Your Saint in the Altered World." Cecilia, Lamb, and Annabelle sit together at an elegant outdoor table, sharing a quiet afternoon tea together. Smiling brightly, Annabelle expresses her delight that they could join her on such short notice, mentioning how lovely Lamb looked in those clothes. Cecilia smiles politely while internally sweating, completely bewildered by the unexpected turn of events that led her to run into Annabelle here. Annabelle admits her surprise at learning Lamb is actually a man, and politely inquires if the two of them are in the territory for sightseeing. Lamb smiles nervously and explains that he had simply always wanted to visit the Onyx territory at least once. Chibi Annabelle beams with joy, expressing that it is a true honor to have them go out of their way to visit. Lamb brings up a detail that concerned him, asking why the money he paid for his clothes was immediately handed over to someone else. Holding her teacup with gloated, gloved hands, Annabelle casually explains that it simply happened to be collection day. Annabelle happily explains that in this territory, a decree dictates that all currency must be paid directly to the House of Onyx. Deeply troubled by this revelation, Lamb asks her why on earth such a system would be established. Annabelle innocently replies that it would be highly unfair if individuals gained special profits through direct trade. Clenching his fist tightly under the table, Lamb asks how the common people manage to live if there is no exchange of currency allowed among them. Annabelle explains that the citizens have no need for money because the Onyx family properly distributes all daily necessities, food and clothing, adding that she even distributes delicious cakes instead of bread. Annabelle's eyes are shadowed beneath her hat as she continues to smile, stating that having the same things all the time would be far too boring. Lamb is chilled to the bone, sweating as he realizes that the citizens are denied wages and are essentially being treated as slaves.
Text bubbles on a somber backdrop note that there is absolutely no need for concern.
Annabelle beams with a flawless, naive smile, declaring that they always have the happiness of their citizens in mind.
Smiling weakly to hide his alarm, Lamb nervously nods, though he is deeply unsettled by her use of the word "we." A tense silence falls over the group as Cecilia looks on with a troubled expression while Annabelle continues talking. Back in their safe house, Leon stands by the window looking grim, repeating in disbelief that the Onyx family is confiscating all of the people's property. Leon looks down at his companions, noting that the situation is far more severe than anticipated, while Lamb adds that diplomatic sales have likely been falsified as well. Leon warns that there is a high probability the Onyx family is concealing illegal systems just as vested, concluding that they may have to capture Annabelle depending on her true intentions. Lamb reflects on Annabelle's cheerful demeanor, noting that she seemed genuinely innocent and truly believed the citizens were happy under their rule. Leon deeply ponders the situation, questioning if Annabelle really has no ill intent, but notes that if the true suffering of the people isn't reaching the head of the house, something is deeply wrong. Lamb reflects deeply on their recent meeting, thinking to himself that Annabelle kept using the word "we" during their conversation, indicating that there might be something suspicious going on behind the scenes. Lamb turns to Cecilia, expressing his concerns and asking her if she could look into Annabelle and the current state of the House of Onyx in more detail. Narration reveals that the ones pulling Annabelle's strings from the shadows are the assistant governor, the appraiser, the maid, and the secretary. They have pampered her to an abnormal degree since childhood, but monitored and severely punished her whenever she disobeyed them.
Shadowy figures control young Annabelle like a puppet. Narration states that all of this was done to create a compliant doll who would simply nod and take the fall for their illegal administration. Young Annabelle is depicted blindfolded with her heart shattered. Narration explains that the real Annabelle is a girl who isn't even allowed to think for herself, and she spoke of their absurd policies with no malice because they weren't her own ideas. Leon listens somberly, noting that the previous head of the House of Onyx died 10 years ago, which means Annabelle was targeted from a very young age. A tense silence falls over the group as the realization sets in, leaving Cecilia to declare their actions absolutely unforgivable. With a fierce fire in her eyes, Cecilia remembers her own past struggles, declaring that killing someone's will and forcing only what is convenient on them is completely wrong. Leon remains silent, his expression grim as he processes Cecilia's anger and the weight of their discovery. Leon clenches his fist tightly, stating that he originally intended to confirm Annabelle's stance first, just as they did with Vest. Leon stands tall before his companions, announcing a change of plans. They are going to capture the corrupt officials who are manipulating Annabelle. Cecilia explains that the conspirators constantly share information and even use a rotation system to keep Annabelle under their tight control. Leon adds that if they try to take the conspirators down one by one, their coordination will break, and they might catch on to the group's movements. Lamb looks up in realization, asking if they need to capture them all at once, and wonders if Aoyori could simply cast a barrier over the entire estate. Oguri suddenly appears close behind Lamb with a smirk, stating that doing so would be quite difficult. Startled by how close Aoyogi is standing, Lamb frantically asks how long he has been there. Aoyogi calmly explains that the mana consumption of his barriers is proportional to their power, meaning there is a limit to the range he can cover using only his internal mana without the aid of replenishment tools. Aogiri notes with a grin that the group doesn't have any mana replenishment supplies right now, though Vest had some, leaving Leon groaning in frustration. Cecilia suddenly chimes in with a slightly nervous sweat, suggesting that regarding that issue, everything should actually be fine. Leon smiles handsomely and confidently, assuring her that he is certain they will be more than willing to cooperate. Back in the grand drawing room of the Onyx estate, Annabelle and her smug assistant governor greet Leon, apologizing for being absent the day before and wishing they could have arranged a proper welcome. Sitting calmly on the sofa as a maid serves him tea, Leon politely replies that he is at fault for visiting so suddenly. The assistant governor smiles greedily, mentioning he heard Leon has brought something quite special with him this time, to which Leon readily agrees. A butler presents a long, elegant black sword resting in a red velvet-lined box, prompting an intrigued reaction from the hosts. Leon sits back and asks the assistant governor if he is familiar with the sword he typically uses in battle, to which the man eagerly confirms. Leon showcases the newly designed sword alongside the original, explaining that this new weapon is a refined, lightweight version of the Sword of the Voidstone, making it easy for anyone to wield. The assistant governor listens in astonishment as Leon explains that mass production is now feasible despite limited supplies, and that he wishes to entrust the trade of these weapons to them. The assistant governor is completely stunned, realizing they could build an invincible army and thinking that this history-changing item is absolutely incredible. With a greedy, delighted expression, the assistant governor excitedly announces that he will go call their appraiser immediately. In a dark conspiratorial daydream, the corrupt retainers celebrate, plotting to sell the weapons to Lord Topazolite to take over the country, boost their reputation, and easily fake the sales records sent to the Morganites. A high-angle view shows the luxurious drawing room as the retainers gather around, eagerly waiting for the appraiser to examine the valuable sword. The appraiser holds the sword, thinking to himself that if all goes well, he might even figure out the processing technology as he begins the appraisal. Suddenly, the appraiser's eyes widen in sheer shock and confusion as he realizes something is terribly wrong with the weapon. A massive, glowing blue magic circle erupts on the floor beneath the corrupt retainers, sending them into an absolute panic as they scream in terror. The double doors are slammed open as Lamb, Cecilia, Iogri, and their armed guards march into the room to confront the conspirators. The conspirators are horrified to find themselves trapped and unable to use their magic, realizing too late that they have walked right into a trap. Leon gazes coldly at the trembling conspirators, declaring that he knows they have been manipulating Annabelle and lining their own pockets through illicit profits. The assistant governor grits his teeth in rage and panic, sweating profusely as he realizes they have been completely outplayed. Lamb angrily confronts the retainers, shouting that they are monsters for deceiving and manipulating the innocent Annabelle all this time. The maid maintains a deeply unsettling sinister grin, defensively arguing that they were simply educating Lady Annabelle for her own sake since she lost her parents and was all alone. The maid continues to justify their actions with a twisted smile, claiming it is impossible for a young girl to rule the land alone, and asking how they could possibly call their help brainwashing. As Cecilia angrily steps forward to argue, Agori calmly extends his arm to hold her back. Iogiri steps in front of the furious Cecilia, casting a terrifying glare over the corrupt retainers as he coldly commands them to shut up for a moment. Ogiri's inner monologue notes what a spectacular set of liars they are, admitting that while he usually loves exposing and laughing at the true nature of human misdeeds, his eyes glowing with a dangerous, menacing purple light, Aogiri smiles darkly, stating that what they have done to Annabelle is not funny at all. Leon stands up and walks forward, stating that for once he finds himself in complete agreement with Aogiri, striking terror into the hearts of the conspirators. Side by side, Leon and Iogiri loom over the trembling group, with Iogiri warning that if they still refuse to admit their crimes at this late stage, they should learn their weight through their own bodies. With their dark, overwhelming magic filling the room, they declare that if the conspirators still refuse to acknowledge the full weight of their sins, they will learn it the hard way, because it is time for their punishment. The defeated and trembling conspirators sink to their knees on the polished floor, groaning in despair and wondering how they are expected to atone. Leon steps closer, his black combat boot coming into view as he calmly tells them to relax, as he is not in the business of torturing anyone. Leon looks down at the kneeling group with a piercing, serious expression, promising them that as long as they honestly confess everything that happened, they won't have to suffer any pain. Seeing the conspirators' resolve wavering, the nervous secretary frantically sweats, asking what will happen if they do not tell the truth, prompting the panicked assistant governor to angrily warn him not to ask such weird questions. Aogiri smirks, focusing a terrifying, crackling purple magical aura in his hand, coldly warning the corrupt officials that they will all be forced to receive the spell. With a sadistic, glowing purple gaze and a twisted grin, Iogiri explains that if they tell even the slightest lie, his magic will immediately inflict excruciating, unbearable pain directly on their nerves. As Aogiri menacingly warns that his magic is so painful it makes even brawny, battle-hardened warriors cry out in agony, the maid and assistant governor grit their teeth and sweat profusely in sheer terror. Presenting Cecilia with a mock-cheerful ta-da gesture, Aogi announces to the captives that they will have her personally verify the truth of their confessions. Caught completely off guard, Cecilia's face pales with shock as she sweat drops and screams in absolute disbelief at being suddenly put on the spot. Strikes a dramatic, triumphant pose, Aogiri cheerfully proclaims that under Cecilia's magical verification, every single one of the conspirators' lies will be completely exposed. While Cecilia looks on with a nervous, sweating expression, the three kneeling conspirators cry out in absolute horror and despair at the sheer scale of Iogiri's terrifying magic. From the background, chibi versions of Leon and their green-haired companion enthusiastically cheer Cecilia on, eagerly telling her that they are counting on her to handle this. Gripping her skirt, Cecilia's inner monologue frantically complains that Iogiri is definitely doing this on purpose since he knows very well she cannot actually use magical verification. Remembering the events of the original novel, Cecilia realizes she has no choice but to play along, determined to use her knowledge of the story to successfully expose their lies without getting caught. Leon stands tall and imposing before the kneeling conspirators, coldly beginning his interrogation by accusing them of committing fraud with the money acquired through diplomatic dealings. The four corrupt officials remain completely silent, sweat dripping down their faces as they tremble under the heavy, intimidating gazes of their captors. Standing before the trembling captives, Leon demands to know who was responsible for managing the fraudulent diplomatic transactions. Terrified of the impending magical torture, the corrupt maid suddenly points a trembling finger at the secretary, screaming that he was the one managing it all. The secretary's eyes widen in sheer shock and betrayal, while the crying maid hysterically defends herself, screaming that she absolutely does not want to experience Aogiri's terrifying magic. Panicking, the secretary sweats profusely and fiercely yells at the maid, commanding her not to dare reveal the location for the sake of Lord Topolazite. Smiling darkly, a yogi conjures a crackling purple magical sphere in his hand, calmly stating that since they refuse to cooperate, he has no choice but to administer a little painful encouragement. Struck by the agonizing magic, the secretary grits his teeth and lets out a painful gasp, finally breaking under the torture and screaming that the records are hidden in his room. Having successfully extracted the location, Aogiri glances back at Leon with a knowing, smug smile, which Leon silently acknowledges. Trembling and sweating from the lingering pain, the secretary confesses that there is a hidden door inside his room where the fraudulent records are kept. Leon turns his gaze back to Cecilia, asking her for her verification on whether the secretary is telling the truth. Acting quickly, Cecilia nervously declares that it is the truth, remembering from the novel's plot that Cecilia and Charles indeed found the secret records behind a hidden door in his room.
Moving to the next charge, Leon demands to know why they concealed the true opinions of the citizens and deliberately falsified their administrative reputation to Annabelle.
The assistant governor desperately tries to maintain a greasy, nervous smile, sweating as he insists that the people are perfectly satisfied with the country's system and have never complained. He mockingly argues that if the citizens truly hated living under their rule, they could have simply left, claiming that the fact no one has left is definitive proof of their complete satisfaction.
Cecilia is deeply disgusted by his brazen lies, recalling that in the original novel, the furious citizens eventually launched a revolution that banished Annabelle and her corrupt retainers. Cecilia remembers the tragic truth that the conspirators systematically stripped the citizens of their freedom, extorting their hard-earned money under the guise of fake taxes. Pointing her finger in absolute fury, Cecilia passionately shouts that their extortion is not proof of satisfaction, declaring she will never forgive them for deceiving both Annabelle and the innocent people. With a bright, cheerful smile on his face, Aogiri conjures another sparking magic orb, announcing that it is time for their next round of punishment. A massive bolt of purple magical lightning strikes the assistant governor, sending him screaming in absolute agony while the others look on in horror. As the charred assistant governor collapses face first onto the floor, the maid and monocle guy tremble violently, whimpering in complete terror at the brutal display. The double doors are quietly opened as the young and innocent Annabelle slowly steps forward, looking down at her kneeling retainers. Clenching her black-gloved fist, Annabelle speaks in a quiet, trembling voice, asking if all the happy opinions she had heard from her citizens were actually nothing but lies.
Annabelle remembers her childhood, stamping official documents with her family's seals surrounded by the smiling retainers, wondering if the policies they created together were never meant to make the people happy.
Her eyes shadowed with sorrow, young Annabelle recalls how she was promised that they would make the territory happy together after her parents died, remembering how they swore they were her family. Overcome with spite and desperation, the corrupt maid suddenly snaps, screaming at Annabelle to shut up and declaring that they never once considered her as family. Glaring at the young girl with pure venom, the maid harshly reveals that the cakes, beautiful dresses, and excessive pampering were all just cheap bait to keep her compliant and easily manipulated. Annabelle stands silently, absorbing the crushing reality of her betrayal, while her heart breaks over the painful realization that her cherished family was a lie. Turning away, Annabelle quietly mutters that she was truly betrayed, her posture slumped in deep despair. Trembling with vulnerability, Annabelle looks up with teary, purple eyes, completely lost and asking what she is supposed to do in a situation like this. The maid's furious expression suddenly freezes into a shocked, confused gasp as she hears Annabelle's strange question. Wringing her gloved hands together nervously, Annabelle explains that she has never dealt with this kind of reality before, asking the retainers if they have any instructions for her. Looking down at the kneeling captives, Annabelle desperately begs them to tell her what her next action should be, as she has never learned to think for herself. The maid and the other conspirators sweat heavily, realizations sinking in as they wonder what to do now that their perfect, mindless doll is asking them for instructions in front of her captors. Looking at Annabelle's helpless state, Cecilia clenches her fist tightly, declaring that this pathetic, dependent girl is the direct, tragic result of the retainer's abusive manipulation. Cecilia angrily points out that they excessively punished and controlled a young, vulnerable Annabelle just to use her as a puppet, giving her nothing but superficial, heartless love. With her blue eyes blazing with a fierce, protective anger, Cecilia shouts at the trembling captors, demanding if they even realize how truly monstrous their actions were. A tense silence settles over the grand drawing room as the group stands before the kneeling conspirators, while Cecilia softly addresses the trembling, silent girl. Looking at Annabelle with a gentle, deeply empathetic expression, Cecilia softly reaches out, beginning to speak. Suddenly, a bright golden magic circle erupts on the floor between the characters, catching Cecilia completely off guard as she gasps in shock and absolute disbelief. Amidst a shower of falling pale rose petals, a pair of elegant heels steps forward. Looking on, Leon and Aogiri react with tense surprise to the newcomer's mocking comment about how comical and entertaining the display of torture was. As white rose petals float gently through the air, the mysterious intruder's voice echoes, mockingly comparing their dramatic interrogation to a silly puppet show. Revealing a glimpse of her face beneath a crown of white roses, the elegant blonde woman smirks mockingly, asking why they do not try their hand at theater instead. Her face pale with shock, the maid frantically gasps out the name of the unexpected intruder, calling her Lady Vivian. Cecilia looks on with a sweat drop and a deeply confused expression, her inner thoughts racing as she realizes she has absolutely no idea who this mysterious woman is. Standing tall before the group in the grand drawing room, the elegant blonde woman calmly offers a polite yet mocking apology for her sudden intrusion. Adorned in a lavish yellow gown decorated with dark blue roses and surrounded by a shower of pink petals, the beautiful blonde woman introduces herself as Vivian Topalizite. Cecilia's eyes widen in sheer shock as she recalls the original novel's plot, frantically realizing that the head of the Topazolite family was supposed to be a middle-aged man named Diego, leaving her to wonder who this woman could possibly be. Staring at the beautiful, yellow-eyed woman as she smiles with a mysterious charm, Cecilia desperately questions the intruder's true identity in her mind. Under a beautiful canopy of blue and white roses, the golden-eyed Vivian Topalizite smiles elegantly, leaving Cecilia completely baffled by her unexpected appearance. Hiding her face behind an ornate blue and yellow lace fan, Vivian narrows her eyes, claiming she smells something suspicious and directly asking Aoguri if this magic belongs to him. Looking completely unbothered, Aoguri smiles smugly with closed eyes as Vivian coldly labels him a disgrace of a mage. Peering over her fan with a piercing, gold-eyed gaze, Vivian coolly asks Aoguri if he is truly okay with never seeing his precious friend again. Looking away with a cold, indifferent expression, Aogiri quietly replies that he does not mind, admitting he never expected anything regarding that person from the very beginning. Surrounded by a crackling dark purple magical aura, Aogiri stands in deep silence, prompting a sweating Cecilia to wonder what they are talking about, as Aogiri's friend was never mentioned in the original novel. Stepping closer to the trembling, white-haired captive, Vivian looks down at her with a calm expression, while Annabelle gasps in shock at her presence. Vivian closes her eyes with a dramatic sigh, reminding Annabelle of her important role as the Minister of Foreign Trade and noting how troublesome it would be if she were to get caught here. Extending her hand toward the young girl, Vivian commands Annabelle to hurry over, stating that she has personally come to save her from her captors. Leon instantly steps in, blocking Vivian's path and drawing his dark, blood-red sword with a fierce metallic clang to protect the girl. Glaring with intense, ice-cold eyes, Leon firmly warns Vivian that he will not allow her to do as she pleases, declaring that they will be the ones to decide Annabelle's fate. Vivian's elegant composure cracks as she snaps her fan open with a sharp, displeased frown, visibly annoyed by Leon's interference. Pointing his dark sword directly at Vivian, Leon unleashes a terrifying dark purple shadow magic that begins to swirl menacingly around her feet. Vivian looks back in surprise as Cecilia suddenly speaks up, catching her attention. Standing firmly behind the young girl, Cecilia shocks everyone by gently telling Annabelle that it is perfectly okay for her to go with Vivian. Leon's eyes widen in absolute shock and disbelief as he turns to Cecilia, screaming her name in complete confusion at her unexpected decision. Looking at Cecilia with a serious and analytical expression, Vivian flatly states that she has no intention of capturing her. Looking warmly at Annabelle, Cecilia gently tells her that she wants her to decide for herself which path she truly wishes to choose. Watching the emotional exchange, Aogiri reflects on the Book of Life vows Leon mentioned, noting that Cecilia's desire to let Annabelle decide for herself is clearly driven by her own personal feelings rather than the strict contract terms. With tears streaming down her pale face, Cecilia stands in deep sorrow, her inner monologue reflecting on whether her current protective actions are tied to the tragic words she let slip in the past. A club application form sits on a wooden desk, bearing the written command that the brass band club is forbidden and that she must join the track and field club instead. A young schoolgirl in a sailor uniform looks completely shocked, her mother's harsh voice telling her that music costs too much money and is entirely useless for her future. A hand aggressively writes down track and field club on the form, explaining that it builds stamina and is much cheaper, leaving the young girl completely helpless to object. Looming over her daughter with a dark, furious expression, the mother fiercely yells that everything she is doing is solely for the girl's future. The mother's harsh, manipulative words echo as she calls her daughter an ungrateful child for wanting to do club activities instead of helping with housework, leaving the young girl standing in silent, trembling despair. The young girl stands in absolute horror and shock, staring down at another schoolgirl lying lifelessly in a pool of blood on the concrete street. Over a dark, rainy backdrop of faceless adult figures surrounding a small child holding a toy rabbit, a quiet monologue reflects on the painful realization that blindly following orders is wrong, and how Annabelle's helpless state perfectly mirrors her own past. Looking at Annabelle with a gentle, determined expression, Cecilia softly tells her that she is not just a brainless doll meant to blindly follow orders, resolving in her heart that she won't let the girl suffer the same regrets she did. With a warm, compassionate look in her blue eyes, Cecilia tells the stunned young girl that she is fully allowed to make her own decisions. In a quiet flashback, a young Annabelle sits alone at a lavish tea table on a sunny terrace, staring down at her cup in confusion as she is asked about her hobbies. Charles, a handsome blonde young man in a white military uniform, smiles warmly and holds a teacup, looking at her with absolute kindness.
Sitting at the table, Annabelle explains that her maid recommended dance to improve her social skills, her books are for her education, and she was arranged to play music to heighten her sensitivity.
Sitting across from her, a beautiful, red-haired woman, and Charles listen gently. Charles softly encourages her, telling her that she is allowed to decide things for herself, and asking if there is anything she truly wants to do.
Annabelle looks up with wide, startled eyes, nervously asking if it is really all right for her to make decisions without first getting permission from her retainers.
Surrounded by blooming red roses, the stunning red-haired woman smiles warmly, tenderly telling Annabelle that her own feelings are the most important thing of all. Overjoyed and deeply moved, Annabelle suddenly stands up, slamming her fists on the table as she enthusiastically shouts that she wants to play together with them and go to the sea. While Charles and the red-haired woman stare at her in shock, a chibi version of Annabelle sweat drops, instantly panicking and apologizing, worrying that she was being improper despite being the head of the family.
Breaking into bright, joyful laughter, Charles and the red-haired woman smile back at her with absolute warmth and affection. Seeing their happy reaction, Annabelle beams with a massive, genuinely happy smile, her eyes sparkling with pure, unadulterated joy.
Looking up at a beautiful, clear blue sky filled with soft white clouds, Annabelle reflects on how her very first true wish was accepted with a warm, loving smile by those two. In a beautiful, sun-drenched memory, a young Annabelle runs joyfully along a sandy beach under a bright blue sky, while Charles and a stunning red-haired woman watch over her with incredibly warm and loving smiles. In her heart, Annabelle reflects on how she could have possibly forgotten her true feelings, realizing that all along, all she ever really wanted was a friend.
Back in the tense drawing room, Annabelle looks down in silence, her eyes shadowed, as a genuine and peaceful smile gently graces her lips for the first time. Suddenly, with a bright and determined look on her face, Annabelle stands straight up, ready to announce her choice. Grabbing Cecilia's sleeve with a firm, decisive grip, Annabelle announces that she has finally made her decision. Throwing her arms around a startled Cecilia, Annabelle smiles with pure joy as she happily declares that she has chosen to stay with Cecilia. Cecilia's face immediately flushes with a deep blush as her eyes widen in absolute shock and disbelief at the sudden embrace. Beaming with a radiant smile and closed eyes, Annabelle enthusiastically adds that she likes Cecilia much more than anyone else. While Annabelle happily clings to her, a sweat-dropped Cecilia realizes with utter bewilderment that another character who was supposed to be her enemy in the original novel has suddenly become her ally, leaving her completely unsure of what to do next. Closing her eyes with a sigh of annoyance, Vivian snaps her fan half shut, coldly telling the group that they have played around enough. Vivian calmly explains that she knows they are trying to capture her to negotiate with Bella, but points out that she is already well aware of Bella's desire to have her killed, shocking the Imperial guards who wonder how she could possibly know such secrets. Her golden eyes narrowing with a chilling, fierce intensity, Vivian declares that she will not let things play out according to their plans, stating coldly that she is the one who must kill Bella. Looking away with a tense sweat drop, Cecilia is left deeply unsettled, wondering what Vivian could possibly mean by saying she has to kill Bella. Gently waving her ornate fan, Vivian begins to channel a bright golden magic that sparkles in the air as she notes that if they want to stop a fight to the death, there is only one true way. Surrounded by a brilliant, glowing magic circle and a shower of floating light purple roses, Vivian turns back elegantly, telling Cecilia that she will be waiting for her at the Topazolite residence. Giving a final, mocking smirk over her shoulder, Vivian addresses Cecilia directly by name as her golden magic prepares to transport her away. With a final flash of golden light, Vivian disappears, leaving behind her command to wait at the Topazolite residence. Having successfully exposed the crimes committed within the Onyx territory, the group's all-out confrontation with the Topazolite family is officially decided. High above the bustling town, the imposing architecture of a grand cathedral and half-timbered houses stands tall, representing the next major wall that the group must face. In the council room, Lamb reports with a serious expression that a trade ship is scheduled to arrive at the Onyx territory port shortly. Standing around the large wooden table, Leon looks down thoughtfully and comments that the ship's arrival is much sooner than they had initially anticipated. Leon explains that not all of their foreign trade partners are friendly, warning that if they discover the kingdom is currently unstable due to the revolution, they might launch an attack to seize territory. Therefore, they must negotiate carefully without revealing how close the kingdom is to a complete collapse. In the dark, barred cells of the castle dungeon, the former officials who once handled the kingdom's diplomatic revenue sit imprisoned. With no one left to manage foreign diplomacy, the group faces a critical crisis in figuring out how to successfully navigate the upcoming negotiations. Turning to a quiet, deep-in-thought Annabelle, Lamb notices her expression and asks why she looks so worried, catching her completely off guard.
Annabelle looks up with wide, innocent eyes and asks if the situation simply means they just have to pretend like they know exactly what they are doing.
The entire room, including Leon, Cecilia, Lamb, Aguirre, and the guards, stares at Annabelle with hilariously shocked and speechless expressions, completely stunned by her simplistic and bold suggestion. Down at the sunny, bustling port, a massive wooden trade ship docks near the stone pier, where merchants and workers begin to grumble and wonder why the kingdom's representatives are running so late. Standing on the grassy field, a group of foreign merchants anxiously discuss whether the persistent rumors of a rebellion within the country might actually be true, hoping desperately that it is just unfounded anxiety.
A pair of elegant, dark brown leather lace-up boots steps purposefully onto the lush green grass, drawing closer to the waiting merchants.
The merchants turn around in surprise and relief as a voice cheerfully apologizes for keeping them waiting, greeting her warmly as Lady Onyx. Framed by a beautiful border of bright yellow sunflowers, Annabelle stands confidently in a sophisticated navy and white uniform, holding a blue ledger as she introduces herself as Annabelle Onyx, the General Manager of Foreign Affairs.
In a quick flashback to their preparations, Lamb, Leon, and Cecilia push open a heavy wooden door, with Lamb gasping in absolute shock as he asks what kind of room they've just entered.
Cecilia stares in utter amazement at the grand sunlit office, which is completely covered in towering mountains of books, scrolls, and loose papers from floor to ceiling. Standing proudly in the middle of the chaotic study, Annabelle spreads her arms and brightly announces that this room contains absolutely everything they need to execute their grand scheme. Annabelle holds up 3 colorful books from the desk, asking about the middle one, as her chibi self cheerfully explains that it is the detailed script for a jeweler's role, eagerly telling them to leave the performance to her. Taking a deep breath, Annabelle closes her eyes and then snaps them open, her expression instantly shifting into a highly professional, elegant gaze surrounded by blooming pink roses. Stepping forward, Annabelle gently takes Cecilia's hand in her gloved fingers, examining it with an intense analytical focus that catches Cecilia completely by surprise. Cecilia breaks into a nervous sweat, frantically wondering if Annabelle is staring at her hand, only to quickly realize that her sharp gaze is actually focused on something else entirely. Smiling warmly, Annabelle remarks that a round-cut sapphire using southern processing techniques makes the clear blue color look exceptionally beautiful, leading Cecilia to realize that she is masterfully pretending to examine an imaginary ring. Spreading her hands wide with a dramatic, expert flourish, Annabelle continues her flawless performance, declaring that what she would actually recommend to Lady Cecilia is not a sapphire, but rather a brilliant white topaz. Gently cradling Cecilia's hand once more, Annabelle elegantly explains that Cecilia's greatest charm is her beautiful blue hair, and a clear white topaz with delicate cuts would serve to further enhance that natural beauty. Cecilia looks on with sparkling, deeply impressed eyes as she watches Annabelle confidently act out the role of a sophisticated, spectacle-wearing jeweler, marveling at how incredibly realistic and convincing her acting is. Looking around at the endless shelves, Cecilia is left in complete awe, turning to ask if all of the books in the massive room are actually scripts for different personas. Surrounded by a beautiful collage of her playing various roles, from a refined noble lady to an intellectual scholar, Annabelle proudly boasts that she has completely memorized every single book, declaring that as long as she has a script, she can successfully play any role. Watching her performance, Leon reflects in deep thought, realizing that by utilizing Annabelle's extraordinary acting talent, none of them will need to appear in public, allowing them to remain completely hidden in the shadows. Leon immediately takes charge, ordering Lamb to work out the exact transaction details by the day after tomorrow and to interrogate the captured aide to uncover the standard diplomatic procedures, to which a motivated Lamb quickly agrees. Back in the present at the busy docks, a triumphant Annabelle proudly pumps her fist in the air and cheers that she successfully pulled off the negotiation, standing next to a very confused brown cow. The young Imperial guards are absolutely overjoyed as they look at the massive piles of crates and supplies, tearfully cheering that they will finally get to eat meat for the first time in ages and will be set with food and magical tools for a long time. Watching the busy scene at the harbor, Cecilia turns to one of the guards and politely asks if they can bring a specific batch of cargo over, to which the guard happily obliges. As the crowd of harbor workers and soldiers bustles about, Cecilia suddenly spots a silver-haired girl carrying a small sack slip quietly into the crowd, whispering Annabelle's name in confusion. Looking highly concerned, Cecilia alerts Leon that Annabelle has just walked off alone toward the city market, prompting Leon to turn to her and ask what is wrong. Standing in the busy city square, Annabelle hands a heavy sack of money to a townsperson, politely thanking him for all his hard work and warmly inviting him to take as much as he likes. Watching from a distance, Cecilia's eyes widen in sheer shock as she suddenly remembers a dark scene from the original novel where an angry citizen was on the verge of attacking Annabelle.
Cecilia realizes with a cold sweat that this is exactly how events played out in the original novel, while Leon watches her with a calm, discerning gaze. An angry citizen steps forward, shouting in frustration and asking if they are mocking them, declaring that handing out money like this is completely meaningless.
Annabelle looks down with a sorrowful expression, softly admitting that she knows she has caused immense suffering to many people in the city. Suddenly, a black-gloved hand cuts through the air, intercepting the tense situation and leaving Annabelle looking up in complete surprise.
Stepping forward protectively, Leon Morganite blocks the angry citizens, who immediately murmur his name in stunned disbelief. Leon addresses the crowd of townspeople, firmly explaining that Annabelle deeply regrets her past actions and chose of her own free will to start a revolution alongside them. With an unwavering gaze, Leon declares that whether Annabelle is truly fit to be the head of the Onyx family is a matter that should only be decided after their revolution is successfully over. Hearing the respected commander's words, the townspeople reluctantly begin to back down, muttering that they should leave if Leon Morganite himself is defending her. Watching Leon's noble and reliable intervention, Cecilia can't help but smile warmly with a gentle blush of relief on her face. Standing amidst a background of blooming pink flowers, Annabelle looks at Leon's retreating figure and softly whispers her gratitude. Back inside the council room, Leon commends the group for successfully handling the difficult foreign diplomacy, stating that they must discuss some critical details before preparing for the upcoming full-scale battle. Leon warns everyone that the coming conflict will be extremely difficult, pointing out that their opponent is one of the 3 great noble families and possesses the powerful proof of heirship. An ancient legend depicts 3 brave mages who rose up long ago to save the king from a powerful demon, utilizing special magical stones of infinite power to successfully complete their rescue. Those legendary magical stones became known as the proof of heirship, serving as an absolute testament to the power of the 3 great noble families, with their infinite magical power persisting to this very day. Analyzing their slim odds, one of Leon's subordinates points out that fighting head-on would be suicidal, making a covert operation to steal the magical jewel their only viable option.
Suddenly, another subordinate excitedly points out that they have a secret weapon right in their midst, loudly declaring that Cecilia is fully capable of utilizing the proof of heirship.
The soldier explains that only those destined to lead the 3 great noble families bear the sacred stigmata on their bodies, and since Cecilia possesses those very marks, she should easily be able to wield its power. Standing in silence, Cecilia breaks out in a nervous sweat, completely frozen and unsure of how to respond to their high expectations. A tense silence fills the room as Leon and Lamb look over at Cecilia, silently observing her hesitant and troubled expression. Noticing her sudden quietness, the soldiers look back at Cecilia in concern and ask if something is wrong. Plastering on a fake, strained smile, Cecilia tells the group that she isn't feeling very well and politely excuses herself to go get some rest. As one of the subordinates prepares to follow her, Lamb gently reaches out and stops him in his tracks. Lamb explains with a sympathetic expression that Cecilia is likely feeling the immense pressure of her crucial role in the operation, suggesting they give her some quiet time alone. Alone in the hallway, Cecilia's inner thoughts scream in absolute panic as she realizes the massive trouble she is in. Clutching her glowing handmark, Cecilia frantically reflects on how she had managed to survive up until now using her knowledge of the novel and bluffing about magic, but never anticipated having to actually use the proof of heirship. Picturing a hilarious mental image of a horrified Leon and Lamb looking completely disappointed in her, Cecilia realizes she must learn how to use at least a basic amount of magic before they set out to capture Vivian. Walking down the grand corridor, Cecilia notes that she cannot risk asking Leon's subordinates for help. She needs to find someone who already knows her secret of not being able to use magic, but who is also a masterful expert. Realizing she has only one option left, Cecilia determinedly slams open a door, deciding that she must rely on a specific person to save her. Inside the room sits Aogiri, who looks up with a cool, knowing smirk and adjusts his gold-framed spectacles upon seeing his sudden visitor. Rushing inside, Cecilia clasps her hands together and desperately begs Aogiri to teach her how to use magic. With pleading eyes, Cecilia continues to implore Aogiri, earnestly repeating her desperate plea for him to guide her. Aogiri chuckles softly and remarks that while he understands the predicament, the entire situation is incredibly ridiculous. As Aogiri uses his magic to levitate a custom uniform, Cecilia sweat drops and mutters that his own appearance is just as ridiculous, to which he casually replies that he is simply following Leon's orders. Turning around, Aogiri briskly tells her it is time to go, leaving a bewildered Cecilia to ask where exactly he is taking her. With an elegant flourish, Aogiri turns back and extends his hand towards Cecilia, offering to lead the way to their training spot.
Arriving at a beautiful, secluded grassy clearing surrounded by dense forest, Aogiri smiles and notes that they won't be seen by anyone there, making it the perfect training spot.
Beginning the lesson, Aogiri instructs Cecilia that their very first step must be working on grasping the natural flow of mana within her body. Aogiri explains that regardless of what magic she wishes to master, this is the absolute starting point, but a frustrated Cecilia admits that she simply cannot get the hang of it. Sensing her struggle, Aogiri reaches out and gently takes Cecilia's hand in his own to guide her energy directly. Leaning in incredibly close, Aogiri softly tells Cecilia that he will directly convey the sensation of flowing mana by channeling it through his own body. Finding him suddenly so close, Cecilia's face flushes a bright red as she stammers in absolute shock and embarrassment. As Aogiri tells her to relax and places his hand near her core, Cecilia feels a strange, powerful sensation coursing through her, realizing frantically that this physical closeness is getting out of hand. Surrounded by a fantasy border of blooming pink roses, Aogiri calmly asks if this makes it easier to understand, while a crimson-faced Cecilia panics internally that he is far too close. Leaning right down to her ear, Aogiri whispers softly, asking if she can feel the pulse of the mana flowing within his body. Unable to handle the overwhelming closeness any longer, Cecilia suddenly shouts for him to stop and pushes him back, her marked hand glowing brightly. Adopting a hilariously stiff formal posture, a deeply embarrassed Cecilia declares that she finally understands the method and will practice on her own, leaving Aogiri sweating and wondering what brought on the sudden formality. Taking a deep breath, Cecilia stands on the grassy field and concentrates deeply to gather her energy, while Aogiri sits back on a stern stool to watch her progress. Seeing a brilliant light spark between her hands, Cecilia enthusiastically cheers that she actually managed to create a flow of mana, while a smiling Aogiri claps gently and suggests they take a well-deserved break. Sitting on a stone stool, Aogiri casually turns to Cecilia, who is lying flat on her back on the grass, and asks her if she has decided what kind of magic she wants to learn. Looking up at the sky, Cecilia replies that she is thinking of learning healing magic, though Aogiri counters that attack magic would be much more useful for self-defense. Sitting up with a sigh, Cecilia admits that while she does want to learn offensive spells, she has another deeply personal reason for her choice. She recalls a tragic flashback of a schoolgirl lying in a pool of blood and a green-haired person in pain, reflecting on how she was always completely helpless whenever anyone got hurt. With a bright, determined expression, Cecilia looks up to the sky, hoping to finally gain the power to save and protect those around her. Aogiri stares back at her in a long, silent pause, studying her earnest expression with a look of quiet contemplation. Breaking the silence, Aogiri gently notes that Cecilia is truly a difficult person to understand. Restability, resting his chin on his hand, Aogiri confesses that she is the first person he has ever met who is so hard to read, prompting Cecilia to nervously ask what brought on the sudden comment. Aogiri gazes down thoughtfully, whispering that there's still so much he doesn't understand about her. Suddenly, Aogiri's eyes glow with an intense, menacing purple light as he leans forward and directly asks her where she truly came from. Caught completely off guard, Cecilia stammers that she simply came from a small village, but Aogiri immediately presses further, demanding to know where she was before that. As Cecilia stands frozen in fear, Aogiri points out that it makes absolutely no sense for her to have been able to guess so many hidden truths. He brings up a memory of her confidently exposing secrets during the interrogation, pointing out that as a simple village girl, she shouldn't know anything about those people, as if she knew their pasts from a previous life. Sweating profusely under his intense scrutiny, Cecilia remains silent, while Aogiri asks if she is truly unable to tell him the truth. Clenching her hand into the grass, Cecilia deflects by reminding Aogiri that he has secrets of his own, pointing out how out of character he acted before, and asking if a close friend is being held hostage. Turning his back to her, Aogiri softly admits that he, too, has deep secrets that he wishes to keep hidden. Looking back over his shoulder, Aogiri suggests that they call it a day and stop their training session for now. Walking away down the path, Aogiri chides himself internally for letting his emotions get the better of him and breaking his usual composure. Watching his retreating figure, Aogiri pieces the clues together in his mind, realizing with absolute certainty that Cecilia is not from this world. Desperate to reach him, Cecilia shouts out that while she may be an outsider, she possesses vast knowledge about this world. She explains with fierce determination that for the sake of her beloved friend, who cherished this world more than anyone else, she is fully committed to making their revolution succeed. Aogiri stops in his tracks, his thoughts turning dark as he grimly realizes she made a terrible mistake sharing her secret, silently vowing to bring about her ruin. A dark, terrifying shadow of Aogiri looms over Cecilia as his inner voice asks if he should make her feel that paralyzing fear from before once again. Trembling slightly, Cecilia looks down and honestly confesses that even now she is still incredibly terrified of him.
However, she takes a bold step forward, declaring that if she remains frightened of him forever, she will never be able to truly understand him. Standing amidst a shower of beautiful white blossoms, Cecilia eagerly reaches out and declares that she genuinely wants to know more about him, shocking Aogiri to his core. A brief, warm memory flashes of Aogiri standing shoulder to shoulder with his close friend, a cheerful, orange-haired youth. Suddenly snapping back to the present, Aori leans in incredibly close with a sly smirk, causing a blushing Cecilia to yell in surprise. Flustered and red-faced, Cecilia pushes him away, loudly protesting that he is far too close, and that physical proximity is not what she meant by wanting to know him. As they walk back through the cobblestone streets at sunset, Aogiri tells her that mastering magic requires endless practice, instructing her to meet him every evening. Reaching into his robes, Aogiri hands over a beautifully bound leather book to a confused Cecilia. Opening the book, Cecilia is amazed to see a glowing green magical diagram, marveling at how incredibly detailed the explanations for healing magic are. Watching him walk ahead in the warm sunset glow, Cecilia calls out, asking him how he happens to know so much about healing magic. As leaves drift lazily through the air, Aogiri quietly replies that he learned it all because he desperately wanted to know too. He recalls a painful memory of treating his orange-haired friend's heavily scarred and bleeding shoulder, explaining that there was someone in his life who was always getting injured. Clasping the book to her chest, Cecilia looks on with a soft, sympathetic expression as she realizes the identity of the person Aogiri cared for so deeply. Turning back with a charming grin, Aogiri tells her to consider the textbook as repayment for the valuable information she shared with him earlier. Raising a finger to his lips in a playful gesture of secrecy, Aogiri charmingly tells her to keep their training sessions as their own little secret. Back in her room the next day, a deeply flustered Cecilia covers her blushing cheeks, her heart racing as she realizes Aogiri is capable of making such gentle expressions. Placing her hand on the magic book, Cecilia decides that for the time being, she has her magic training covered. Imagining herself clashing swords, Cecilia realizes her physical combat skills are completely lacking and starts wondering who she should ask to teach her swordsmanship. She first considers Leon, but quickly dismisses the idea, hilariously picturing him as a terrifyingly muscular and intense giant who would be far too strict. Instead, she cheerfully decides that she will ask the friendly and approachable Lamb to train with her. However, a sudden romantic fantasy flashes in her mind, depicting a shirtless and muscular man holding her in his arms. Surrounded by a background of blooming pink roses, Cecilia panics and blushes furiously in her daydream, frantically wondering why the scenario turned out so incredibly scandalous. Back in reality, a smiling Lamb repeats her request, confirming that she wants to learn swordsmanship so she can be of greater help to their cause. Overjoyed by his receptive response, Cecilia enthusiastically pumps her fists and cheers that Lamb is truly the absolute best. A beautiful, scenic view of the sunlit town and the towering cathedral in the distance is shown as a cheerful confirmation rings out. The title screen displays the Japanese title for the series, I'll Be Your Saint in the Altered World. Pink cherry blossom petals gently drift down from leafy green tree branches against a clear, sunny blue sky. In a peaceful, sunlit garden outside a magnificent white stone academy, Lamb and Cecilia stand together among the lush green trees, preparing to begin their training session. Holding a training sword in his hand, Lam turns to Cecilia and explains that he will first teach her weight reduction magic. Recalling how she struggled to wield heavy swords in the past, Lam notes that he noticed she didn't use weight reduction magic back then, even though it would have been incredibly helpful. Lam raises his hand, demonstrating how to focus his energy as a warm, green, magical glow begins to radiate from his fingertips. Enveloping his blade in a brilliant emerald aura, Lam instructs Cecilia to concentrate her magic power and imagine it wrapping around the entire sword. Watching the magic work effortlessly, Cecilia's eyes sparkle with excitement while Lam playfully tells her that mastering this technique is a piece of cake. Lam's expression turns serious as he explains that if the difference between a person's physical senses and the actual weight of the object is too large, it can lead to dangerous complications. Cecilia panics comically as she imagines the sheer embarrassment of having her magic-lightened sword easily deflected by a heavy iron sword. Holding a simple wooden block, Cecilia smiles in relief and thanks Lam for taking the time to give her such an in-depth explanation of the mechanics. Lam scratches his cheek with a gentle smile, prompting Cecilia to realize that even though he didn't interact much with her in the original novel, he is incredibly kind. Gaping at him happily, Cecilia reflects on how much closer the two of them have become ever since the day they went out to buy clothes together. She marvels at how wonderful it feels to finally converse so freely with the characters of the novel. With a cute, contented smile, Cecilia realizes that being reincarnated into this magical fantasy world might not be so bad after all, especially now that she has some breathing room. Introducing a young man with neat brown hair, Lam tells Cecilia that this is the classmate who will be training with her today. Cecilia immediately recognizes him as the loyal companion who is always standing by Leon's side. Looking a bit startled by her recognition, the friendly classmate cheerfully introduces himself as Hans. A quick memory flashes of Cecilia being escorted by Hans and his fellow guards, and she realizes with surprise that this friendly training partner is indeed that very same guard. Cecilia recalls that in the original novel, Hans was merely a minor background character who famously lost a swordsmanship match to Leon, while Hans eagerly promises to train her thoroughly. Hans takes his stance on the grassy field and patiently guides Cecilia through the basics, telling her to step forward with her right foot and sweep upward with her left. Wiping sweat from her brow, Cecilia practices the swings with a determined smile, thrilled that her physical body is finally getting used to the intense movements. As she takes another step forward, her boot catches on a small, loose stone in the grass, bringing her momentum to a sudden halt. Cecilia trips and crashes face first onto the grass, her training sword flying from her hands as Lamb and Hans shout out in sheer panic. Helping her up, Lamb gently wipes the dirt from her face and suggests they take a well-deserved break since her clothes are a bit messy. Wandering through the woods during the break, Cecilia looks around under the warm sunset sky, searching for a nearby lake she had heard about to wash off the dirt. Stepping through the bushes, Cecilia is startled to see a shirtless young man standing quietly in the shallow, glistening waters of the lake. She is stunned to find Leon running a hand through his damp hair, marveling at his incredibly toned and muscular physique, which is fitting for someone who has mastered the royal family's swordsmanship. Noticing her presence, Leon turns around in the water and asks Cecilia how her clothes managed to get so dirty. Laughing sheepishly, Cecilia explains that she tripped on a rock while Hans was training her, and she came to the lake to wash off the mud. Stepping out of the water, Leon coldly bids her farewell, leaving a startled Cecilia standing on the bank. She recalls the terrifying moment Leon shielded her from a hostile crowd, realizing she still hasn't properly thanked him for saving her back then. Before he can walk away, Cecilia quickly calls out to him, asking him to wait for just a moment. Smiling brightly, Cecilia tells Leon that she is on a break and would really like to have a proper conversation with him. After a brief, quiet pause, Leon softly agrees to stay. Sitting side by side at the water's edge, Cecilia begins to feel incredibly awkward and tense sitting next to a shirtless, quiet Leon. Stealing a glance at his stern profile, she wonders why expressing a simple thank you feels so incredibly difficult in a moment like this. Seeking to break the ice, Cecilia turns to him and asks why he is always so kind and protective toward Annabelle. Leon looks at her with a serious gaze, reminding her of the dangerous contract binding them through the Book of Life vows, pointing out that things only went well because Annabelle cooperated. He recalls the tense standoff in the Grand Hall, explaining that if anyone had made even the slightest mistake, a bloody battle would have broken out right then and there. Realization hits Cecilia like a physical blow as she admits to herself that she was so preoccupied with Annabelle's safety that she completely ignored the danger of their surroundings. She feels a deep wave of guilt, realizing that her impulsive actions could have brought ruin to everyone around her. Bowing her head in genuine remorse, Cecilia softly apologizes for being so reckless and causing so much trouble. Leon gazes at her softly and tells her that he simply wants to understand her true feelings. Leaning in slightly, Leon asks her why she went so far to defend Annabelle, a person she barely even knows. Looking back at him with soft, honest eyes, Cecilia explains that when she realized how incredibly similar she and Annabelle are, she simply couldn't bring herself to abandon her. Leon looks at her in quiet disbelief, finding it hard to believe that the bright, energetic Cecilia could have anything in common with someone like Annabelle. Kneeling in the grass, Cecilia looks down with a melancholic smile, confessing that she once lived her life exactly the way Annabelle does now. Wringing out her wet socks at the water's edge, Cecilia notes that if Annabelle continues down this path without any help, her heart will remain frozen. Looking up with fierce passion, Cecilia declares that if no one steps in to guide Annabelle, she will definitely grow to regret her choices someday. Stunned by her maturity and emotional depth, Leon watches her in silence, realizing there is a deeply complex past to Cecilia that he never could have anticipated. Flashing a beautiful, radiant smile surrounded by blooming pink roses, Cecilia warmly thanks Leon for protecting Annabelle, admitting she could never have handled the angry crowd on her own. Looking away with a quiet, serious expression, Leon mutters that his protection is nothing worthy of her gratitude. Caught completely off guard by his humble response, Cecilia looks up at him with wide, surprised eyes. Surrounded by a romantic background of drifting petals, a shirtless Leon looks back and confesses that she has always been on his mind. As Cecilia stands at the lake's edge under the glowing sunset sky, she suddenly loses her footing and falls backward with a loud splash. Panicking as he sees her fall, a shirtless Leon calls out her name in concern. Catching her just in time, Leon holds Cecilia securely against his bare chest, surrounded by a dramatic background of blooming pink roses.
Pressed closely against his warm chest, Cecilia blushes furiously and gasps in sheer embarrassment.
Looking down at her with a serious gaze, Leon suddenly asks if she would like to live in the Morganite territory after the conflict is resolved. Cecilia's eyes worsen and her cheeks flush bright red as she reacts in absolute shock to his unexpected question. Feeling a bit flustered himself, Leon gets a bead of sweat on his cheek as he realizes the weight of his own words. Stepping back in the glistening water, Leon quickly apologizes, admitting that it wasn't the right time to bring up such a matter. Walking away through the forest under the sunset sky, Leon quietly scolds himself, wondering why he made such a confusing and sudden proposal. Surrounded by beautiful white roses, Leon envisions Cecilia smiling in the peaceful future he hopes to build alongside his sister. In his heartwarming daydream, Cecilia flashes a radiant, joyous smile among the blooming flowers. Touching his damp hair, Leon stares quietly ahead, lost in his thoughts. Left alone at the water's edge, Cecilia clutches her blushing face in utter disbelief, frantically wondering what just happened. Cecilia reasons that Leon likely made the suggestion because he felt her current living conditions weren't safe. Holding her burning cheek, Cecilia realizes the offer sounded incredibly like a romantic proposal, making her heart pound uncontrollably. Looking out over the shimmering lake under the sunset, Cecilia turns around and admits that living in a city instead of a small village does sound appealing. However, Cecilia suddenly freezes as she realizes that if she stays in this world, she might never return to her original life, recalling her past self collapsed over her desk studying late at night. She looks up with a heavy heart, deeply troubled by what might happen to her original body and the real Cecilia if she remains here forever. Suddenly, a sharp, agonizing pain shoots through Cecilia's head, causing her to clutch her temple in distress. Just as quickly as it came, the pain vanishes, leaving her completely stunned. Standing alone in the lake, Cecilia stares at her dark, red-hued reflection in the water, deeply unsettled by the mysterious sensation. A week later, the highly anticipated operation to capture Vivian Topazolite is finally set to begin. Hiding behind the lush green bushes, the group of rebels quietly observes the massive Topazolite mansion in the distance. Adjusting his glasses, Aoguri explains to the group that the Topazolite estate is divided into 3 distinct wings. He points out that to prevent intruders from stealing their magical secrets, a special spell shuffles the layout of the rooms randomly every day. Looking serious, Leon adds that because of the shuffling spell, they will have to search every single room if they want to find Vivian. He explains their strategy, demonstrating with colored tokens that they will split their forces into 3 infiltration squads. Leon stresses that all 3 squads must enter the wings simultaneously and restrain Vivian the moment she is located. Presenting a small, ornate container radiating a purple magical glow, Aoguri tells them to use his custom-modified magic box to secure their target. Placing a finger to his lips, Aoguri explains that the box can seal any human inside once opened, though it can only be used a single time. With a grave expression, Leon declares that failure is not an option when it comes to stopping his sister, noting that the mission requires elite stealth and combat specialists. Leon turns to Lam, putting him in charge as the captain of the left wing squad, to which Lam enthusiastically salutes. Leon then assigns the central wing squad, prompting Aogiri to point to himself in surprise. Explaining the layout, Leon instructs Aogiri to stand guard at the bridge connecting to the mansion, which Lam agrees is the perfect role for him. Aogiri asks how the remaining squad will be formed, while Lam kindly instructs Annabelle to wait at the bridge as well. Eager to finally be useful now that she can perform magic, Cecilia enthusiastically raises her hand and volunteers to join the infiltration. However, Leon bluntly shuts her down, pointing out that she still cannot defeat Hans in a duel, leaving a cartoonish Cecilia slumped on the floor in comical despair. Leon gently apologizes, firmly telling Cecilia that he needs her to stay safe and wait at the bridge with Aogiri and the others. Cecilia looks at him in soft surprise, wondering if his strict refusal is actually born out of deep concern for her safety. Yielding to his protective stance, Cecilia softly smiles and agrees to stay behind. Suddenly, a terrifying vision of a cathedral engulfed in raging flames flashes in her mind, accompanied by a desperate voice screaming that they cannot stay there. The dark, blood-red vision commands her to go see Vivian immediately. Shaken by the sudden voice, Cecilia stumbles and clutches her aching head, prompting Lam to ask in concern if she is all right. Sweating profusely as a sense of absolute dread washes over her, Cecilia realizes she must go, fearing she will live to regret it if she stays behind. Approaching Leon, Cecilia firmly requests that he let her go, while a puzzled Leon asks why she has suddenly changed her mind about such a dangerous mission. Gripping her chest, Cecilia realizes she has no choice but to reveal her secret as the magical crest on her hand glows brilliantly. Looking at Leon with unwavering determination, Cecilia explains that there are certain rooms inside the mansion that only someone possessing her holy mark can access.
Looking through his round spectacles, Aogiri narrows his sharp purple eyes as he wonders to himself if Cecilia's telling a lie. Cecilia pleads with Lamb, requesting to lead the third squad, but Lamb quickly protests, warning her that such a task is far too dangerous for her. Against a soft backdrop of blooming purple roses, a gentle voice requests to be entrusted with the task. Smiling confidently, Aogiri steps forward to offer his magical support, holding up a gleaming ring. Floating gently in a soft, bright blue light is a beautifully decorated black jewelry box lined with a red velvet cushion. Suddenly, Aogiri dangles a small, round gray mouse named Vest by its tail as the poor creature squeaks in frantic protest.
Lamb gasps in absolute shock, pointing at the tiny creature and shouting Vest's name in disbelief.
Placing Vest gently onto Cecilia's shoulder, Aogiri explains that he has equipped the mouse with an invisibility necklace which will trigger if magic is channeled into him. Smiling cheerfully, Aogiri points out that with Vest's new ability, they will be able to turn completely invisible. As Cecilia channels her magic, a soft blue light envelops her, causing her to fade away and prompting a nearby chibi Annabelle to gasp in wonder at her sudden disappearance.
While Lamb concedes that the invisibility spell lowers their chances of being caught, he skeptically wonders if Vest will simply seize the opportunity to run away. Overhearing the doubt, Vest looks absolutely terrified as Aogiri calmly reveals that he has been mixing components of his magic into the food he feeds him. With a sinister, bright smile, Aogiri cheerfully adds that if Vest tries to flee, he will detonate like a little firework, leaving the mouse shivering in sheer dread while Cecilia quietly notes how cruel it is. Gathering the group together, Leon firmly declares that they will now proceed with the operation to capture Vivian using their newly organized three-squad layout.
Annabelle and Leon proudly present customized armor sets to Cecilia, who warmly thanks Annabelle for her help. The rebel soldiers look incredibly pleased with their upgraded gear, as Aogiri proudly mentions the exhausting all-nighter spent preparing everything. Casting a swirling purple magical portal, Aogiri warns the group that the Topazalite Estate's protective barrier prevents teleportation inside, meaning they must proceed with caution without any way of communicating. Just as they are about to set off, Aogiri quietly calls out Cecilia's name, causing her to turn around in surprise.
Reaching out gently, Aogiri takes Cecilia's hand in his own gloved hand. Bowing his head with an elegance that borders on theatrical, Aogiri gently kisses the back of Cecilia's hand while softly wishing for her safe return. Caught completely off guard by the intimate gesture, Cecilia gasps in shock as a bright crimson blush spreads across her face. Gazing at her with a dark, mocking grin, Aogiri warns her not to misunderstand his kindness, stating that what he truly desires is her ultimate ruin.
Stunned and speechless, Cecilia can only stare at him in wide-eyed silence. Cecilia's sweat drops as she observes Aogiri's unpredictable demeanor, thinking about how scary he can be and admitting to herself that she still has no idea what he is truly thinking. Surrounded by beautiful white blossoms, Cecilia reflects on how much their dynamic has shifted since they first met.
Smiling radiantly among the flowers, Cecilia happily realizes that she can truly trust Aogiri now, whispering a silent thank you to him.
Watching them from a distance, Leon wears a quiet, slightly troubled expression, seemingly bothered by their closeness. Looking ahead with quiet resolve, Cecilia thinks of Ame and notes that even though her current equipment and magic cannot compare to the real Cecilia's, they have finally made it this far. Surrounded by beautiful pink roses, Cecilia makes a solemn vow to succeed in this critical operation for the sake of everyone she cares about. With unwavering determination shining in her bright blue eyes, Cecilia swears to protect this world at all costs. Suddenly, a beautiful flashback unfolds, showing a silver-haired girl running joyously along a sun-drenched beach, pointing out a seashell in the distance. A handsome blonde-haired young man in a pristine white uniform watches her with a tender smile, reflecting that this peaceful scene was once a dream he cherished. The dream shifts to a colder, darker memory, where wealthy nobles snicker and whisper maliciously behind their fans. Desperate cries ring out as a young boy named Charles is forcefully dragged away by guards while a hand reaches out in futile protest. In the pitch-black darkness, a trembling, pale hand reaches out as a fading voice desperately whispers the name Bella. A blood-red void is pierced by a desperate, agonizing scream of denial. With a sudden flutter, a tearful, crimson-red eye snaps wide open in the quiet darkness of the bedroom. Sitting up in her dimly lit bedchamber, the red-haired woman calls out to her maid, Tanya, asking how long she has been asleep. Looking slightly nervous, Tanya bows her head and informs her mistress that she was only asleep for about 10 minutes. Hearing this, the woman quietly thanks her maid and dismisses her, sitting in contemplative silence on her bed. Draped in a heavy dark cloak with a white fur collar, the red-haired woman walks with steady, echoing footsteps down a grand, high-arched corridor. With a firm grip, she pushes open the massive, ornate golden double doors at the end of the hall. Standing on the balcony overlooking the courtyard, she looks down at a massive, silent army gathered beneath the dark purple sky. Looking out over her forces with cold, piercing red eyes, she commands them to execute their plan as scheduled. Her face hardens with a chilling resolve as she declares her name, Vivian Topazolite. A calm, gray sky filled with soft clouds marks the quiet transition of the scene, building a sense of anticipation for what lies ahead. Nestled against the rolling green hills, the massive, imposing stone towers of the Topazolite mansion loom under a cloudy sky. Inside the grand mansion, Lamb and his squad tread carefully, noting with a sense of unease that they have finally entered Vivian's estate. Looking up at the massive crystal chandeliers, Lamb notes how incredibly dark and silent the mansion is, realizing that the complete absence of servants is highly suspicious. Sensing an impending danger, Lamb cautions his squad that there might be a trap ahead before checking the surroundings and giving the order to proceed. With a sudden, startled gasp, a bright green eye snaps wide open as the scene transitions to the high ceiling of a grand, quiet mansion. Looking back in alarm, the young man is confronted by a group of invading magicians who mockingly remark that entering someone's room without permission is hardly polite. Sweating nervously, the green-haired young man scowls as he recognizes the intruders as magicians belonging to the powerful Topalizite family. In a flashback, Leon warns his allies that they must work under the assumption that Vivian has the ability to overhear all of their conversations. Iogri casually explains that he is disrupting Vivian's surveillance magic, but when pressed to explain how his magic actually works, he playfully refuses, claiming it would make things far too boring. Showing only his mouth, wearing a knowing, sinister grin, Aogiri mysteriously hints that there is more to his actions than meets the eye. Standing confidently with his sword, the green-haired young man remembers Iogiri noting that both he and Leon are more than capable of rivaling Vivian's power. Looking at his hand as he channels his magical energy, the young man honestly reflects on his past, admitting to himself that he was simply no match for Iogiri. Unleashing a massive wave of glowing magic, the young man fiercely declares that he is not weak enough to let Lord Leon down when he is counting on him. Leaping forward with incredible speed, the young man completely blindsides the enemy magicians, who gasp in absolute shock at his sudden attack. With Cecilia and Leon standing back to back in his mind, the young man draws strength from the memory of the friends who have supported him. Charging forward with his sword raised, the green-haired young man commands himself to focus, declaring that this is not the time to be standing around. Arriving at the right wing of the Topalite residence, Leon's squad is suddenly cut off and surrounded by a massive division of enemy magicians, leaving them heavily outnumbered. Standing calmly, Leon begins to draw his weapon as he tells the surrounding magicians that he appreciates their courage in stepping forward to face him. With a cold, piercing glare, Leon completely draws his dark, ornate sword ready to tear through the enemy forces. Sensing the immense, suffocating pressure radiating from Leon, the enemy magicians break out in a cold sweat, looking at each other in tense silence. Wearing a dark smirk, the lead enemy magician openly admits that they know they do not stand a single chance against someone as powerful as Leon. Leon keeps his gaze steady and calm, waiting in silence to see what trick the enemy magician has up his sleeve. With a chilling, sinister smile, the magician points out that Leon is missing the point, as their only actual goal is to delay and stop him from proceeding. Leon's face contorts in sudden panic as he grits his teeth, desperately realizing that the enemies might be targeting Cecilia. Slipping past a patrolling guard who is completely oblivious to her presence, a semi-transparent Cecilia enters a grand corridor using her invisibility magic. Watching the guard walk away, Cecilia quietly marvels at how well the invisibility magic works, thrilled that the enemies truly cannot see her. Squeaking in sheer frustration, Vest the mouse complains about how noisy the mansion is, grumbling that things would be different if Iogiri hadn't betrayed him. As a comical chibi Cecilia listens to Vest complain about Awagiri's fake glasses, she sweats in disbelief, wondering how on earth she can understand the mouse's speech and suspecting Awagiri planted something in her. Suddenly, Cecilia's invisibility fades, and she gasps in surprise as a nearby rebel soldier calls out her name. When the soldier asks where the enemies went, Cecilia points down the hall, prompting the soldier to apologize for always relying so heavily on her. Cecilia cheerfully tells him that it is no problem and that she will go on ahead, but her smile instantly vanishes as she is suddenly struck by a powerful headache. Deep within her mind, a mysterious, glowing voice echoes in the darkness, commanding her to proceed alone from this point forward. Clutching her aching head as the soldier calls out to her in worry, Cecilia realizes with a shudder that the strange voice has returned. Understanding that she has no choice but to follow the voice's guidance, Cecilia sadly notes to herself that she must tell another lie to keep the others safe. Turning back to the soldiers, Cecilia lies and tells them that if they destroy the nearby barrier core, Iogiri and the others will be able to back them up, prompting the soldiers to agree. Cecilia promises to return immediately if things seem too dangerous, and the soldier reluctantly agrees to let her go as she heads down the long hallway. Stepping into the shadows, Cecilia notes with a growing sense of unease that the pitch-black hallway is completely devoid of light. Cecilia walks cautiously down the grand, eerie corridor, reflecting on how different the Topazolate mansion is from others, and admitting that it is incredibly creepy. On her shoulder, Vest the Mouse complains to himself, wondering why he has to wander around such a terrifying dark place with a crazy girl. Overhearing the insult, Cecilia glares directly at Vest and dryly apologizes for being such a crazy girl, sending the terrified mouse into a state of absolute shock. Trembling in sheer terror, Vest asks Cecilia how she can possibly understand his speech, and Cecilia calmly confirms that she has been hearing every single word. Desperate to save himself, Vest falls to his knees and begs Cecilia not to tell Leon, offering money or anything else she wants, leaving Cecilia too stunned by his dramatic pleading to even be angry. Cecilia sighs and tells Vest that she won't tell Leon if he just shuts up, prompting the mouse to praise her decision while Cecilia regrets not telling Leon about Vest's true personality sooner. Suddenly, Cecilia's thoughts are interrupted as she notices a bright, warm light spilling out from a nearby open doorway. Peeking through the door, Cecilia's heart leaps into her throat as she catches sight of a blonde woman standing inside the brightly lit room. Looking closer, Cecilia gasps in absolute shock as she recognizes the blonde woman standing elegantly among the white roses. It is Vivian Topalozolite. From a high angle, Vivian can be heard speaking to someone, calmly noting that Leon and Lamb have already been located by her forces. Hiding behind the doorway, Cecilia grows deeply worried for Leon and Lamb's safety, realizing they are in grave danger and that they must hurry to stop Vivian. On the other end of the communication, a voice notes that they still don't know where Cecilia is, but Vivian wears a confident, chilling smirk as she replies that she has already found her. In a terrifying revelation, a close-up of Vivian's sharp golden eyes shows the reflection of Vest the Mouse, proving she can see right through the invisibility magic. Shivering as a sudden chill runs down his spine, Vest nervously wonders if Vivian just saw him, desperately trying to convince himself that it must be impossible. Vest hopes it was just his imagination, but his attention is suddenly drawn to a normal mouse scurrying across the floor nearby. Turning her back, Vivian speaks with cold venom, declaring that everything is her fault because she wrote that creepy novel. With a sinister, victorious smile, Vivian mockingly tries to remember the author's pen name, softly whispering the name Ame in the quiet room. Clutching her chest in sheer disbelief, Cecilia stares wide-eyed as a terrifying realization hits her, desperately wondering why Vivian is speaking of a name from her past, Ame. Her sudden shock is interrupted by a sharp, terrified squeak as Vest the Mouse lets out a loud scream right on her shoulder. Looking down in horror, Cecilia is startled to see a massive mouse silhouette before her, as Vest frantically warns her that this creature is far from a normal mouse. As the dark outer shell of the creature splits open, it reveals a complex network of golden gears and clockwork, confirming that the mouse is actually a lifeless machine. Gasping in absolute shock, Cecilia stares at the mechanical spy, realization dawning upon her as Vest looks on in equal horror. Suddenly, a chillingly familiar voice calls her name from behind, sending a shiver down Cecilia's spine as she gasps in pure terror. Leaning close with a menacing smile, Vivian wraps her arms around Cecilia, mockingly noting that she doesn't seem like herself and asking if she can call her by her old name. Amidst a backdrop of dark purple roses, the whisper of her old name, Haru, echoes like a chilling phantom from her past. With a cruel, victorious grin, Vivian looms over Cecilia, a sinister, dark silhouette of a schoolgirl appearing behind her as she traps the young girl in her grasp. A close-up of Cecilia's trembling blue eye reveals the terrifying reflection of a faceless schoolgirl, dredging up deeply buried memories. Deep within the misty forest, the brilliant magician Oyogiri stands beside the carriages, looking down at his magical tracking device with Cecilia's name on his lips. Examining the glowing purple tablet in his hand, Oyogiri notes with growing unease that while Cecilia's magical signal hasn't vanished, everyone else has completely stopped moving, indicating they must be in contact with someone. Looking back at the silver-haired girl following him, Oyogiri dryly points out that she has been staring at him for quite some time, prompting her to happily declare that she is waiting for him to do something mean to her. In a comical chibi style, a baffled Aoguri questions her strange request, while the cheerful girl blushes and excitedly reveals that Lamb was the one who told her about his mean streak. Clasping her hands together with a sweet, innocent smile, she assures Aoguri that she knows he would never actually do something like that to her.
Aoguri bluntly retorts that he won't do anything mean because it is simply no fun to tease someone who has nothing but flowers stuffed in her head, leaving the girl completely dumbfounded. Missing the insult entirely, the girl curiously looks around the barren forest, pointing out that there are absolutely no flowers blooming anywhere nearby while Aoguri stares in exasperated silence. Sighing in deep frustration, Aoguri dramatically holds his head, telling her that she should just obediently stay behind and chat with the soldiers waiting deep in the forest. Suddenly, Aoguri's eyes widen behind his glasses as a powerful wave of magical energy surges through the forest, catching him completely off guard. Grabbing the startled girl, Aoguri pulls her into a protective embrace as a massive glowing pink magic circle erupts directly beneath them. A grand, intricate pink spell circle illuminates the dense forest canopy as Aoguri shields the girl from the sudden, powerful spell. Crouching low in the bushes, the confused girl looks up at Aoguri, naively wondering if they are playing a game of hide-and-seek. Gritting his teeth in sheer frustration, Aoguri glares through his glasses, desperately wondering why the enemy forces had to arrive at this exact moment. Under the heavy, dark clouds of the forest, a massive, silent battalion of armored knights stands ready to strike. Leading the formidable forces, a red-haired woman draped in a royal cloak steps forward, prompting Aoguri to realize with dread that Bella and the royal capital's army have arrived. Watching the advancing army, Aoguri reasons they must have used a cloaking spell, realizing Leon's men are in grave danger and that he must urgently warn Cecilia and the others. As Aoguri prepares to move, the white-haired girl, Annabelle, begins to cast a spell, her body turning semi-transparent as she prepares to slip away. Stepping into the open, Annabelle happily greets the red-haired leader, calling out to her sister Bella, while Aoguri watches in absolute panic, wondering what she has done. A close-up of Bella's lips shows a cold, chilling smile as she mockingly remarks that it has indeed been a while, Annabelle. With a piercing red gaze, Bella steps forward in her dark armor, politely yet menacingly asking Annabelle if she would kindly let their army pass through. Sensing the impending disaster, Aoguri watches in horror, realizing that if Bella and her army enter the estate now, they will run straight into Cecilia. In the blinding white light, the desperate cry for Annabelle echoes through the silent, tense forest. With a bright, hopeful smile, Annabelle stands tall, completely oblivious to the grave danger mounting around her. Back inside the mansion, the mechanical mouse ruthlessly pins down a normal mouse, proving that the Topazolite family possesses incredibly accurate knowledge of living creatures. Trapped and helpless, Cecilia is squeezed tightly by a massive golden mechanical snake, realizing that Vivian's alchemy allows her to create perfect replica tools of living beasts. Standing proudly with the massive golden serpent coiled around her, Vivian boasts that her alchemy allows her to create any creature, from ants to whales, to serve as her adorable servants. Remembering Aoguri's warnings, Cecilia realizes that their actions were completely exposed, not because of a traitor, but due to Vivian's mechanical spies. A close-up of the golden mechanical snake's red eye reveals the perfect reflection of Cecilia, proving Vivian has been tracking their every move through her clockwork creations. Struggling against the tight coils, Cecilia realizes in panic that this advanced mimicry was never mentioned in the original novel, shocked by the perfect replication of the Topazolite magic. Twirling her hair, Vivian looks down at Cecilia with a smug smirk, reminiscing about their encounter 5 years ago and calling her by her real name, Haru. In a painful flashback to their school days, 3 girls in school uniforms console each other, one of them tearfully clutching her bruised cheek and complaining about how much the slap hurt. Flaunting her elegant golden fan, Vivian bursts into a manic, vengeful laughter, declaring that she is finally ready to return the favor. Unleashing a barrage of golden magic, Vivian sends a rain of destructive energy straight towards the bound Cecilia, who braces for impact in sheer terror. Before the attack can land, a sudden magical blast shatters the giant golden snake into a shower of broken gears, completely catching Vivian off guard. Looking up in utter disbelief, Cecilia gasps as she realizes she's been saved by a powerful, familiar magical intervention. Her smile instantly vanishing, Vivian clicks her tongue in annoyance, narrowing her golden eyes as she realizes the meddlesome Aoguri has interfered yet again. Standing tall and finally free of her mechanical binds, Cecilia reflects in surprise, noting that the novel described Aoguri as someone who despised Cecilia, yet his actions prove otherwise. Her expression twisting into a manic, derisive grin, Vivian mockingly suggests using that to satisfy him, comparing Cecilia to a creepy woman from their past. Cecilia's face flushes with a mix of intense anger and embarrassment, her eyes narrowing as Vivian's cruel insults push her to her limit. Clenching her fist as a glowing blue magical crest shines brightly on her hand, Cecilia glares at her nemesis, declaring with cold resolve that Vivian hasn't changed at all. Clutching her chest in fury, Cecilia glares at Vivian and shouts, "You isolated Ame by spreading lies about her." In a flashback to their school days, Haru turns around in the school hallway as someone calls out her name. Two girls approach Haru in the corridor, with one warning her that she really shouldn't hang out with Ame too much, prompting a confused Haru to ask why. As a dark shadow falls over Haru, the girls whisper cruel rumors, mockingly saying that Ame doesn't have a mother and suggesting that she is doing dirty things with her father instead. With a cold and sharp gaze, Haru defends her friend, telling the girls that she doesn't know who told them that, but they shouldn't make reckless statements about things they don't know are true. Walking away in dejected silence, Haru clutches her papers tightly as the echoing giggles and whispers of her classmates follow her down the hall. Remembering the past, Cecilia realizes the truth behind the cruel rumors and confronts Vivian, saying, "I see it now. You were the one who started those lies, weren't you?" Cecilia shouts in righteous anger, declaring, "I won't let someone like you who hurts others and laughs at them ruin this world." Standing in the dim light of the mansion, Vivian remains silent as a shadow looms over her face. Looking down the grand hallway, Vivian mockingly remarks, "Don't you understand that all this is pointless? While we're talking?" With her golden eyes flashing sinisterly, Vivian says, "That person is trying to destroy the novel she wrote with her own hands." Sweating in confusion, Cecilia looks up and asks, "What are you talking about? Who is trying to destroy it?" Turning her face away, Vivian coldly replies, "You really don't know anything, huh? Bella's true identity is..." Suddenly, Vivian's golden eye widens in absolute shock as a sudden sound catches her completely off guard. A powerful explosion rips through the ceiling of the mansion, forcing Cecilia to quickly deploy a glowing pink defensive magic circle as she gasps in surprise. Amidst the billowing smoke and falling debris, Cecilia stands her ground behind her barrier while Vivian raises her own yellow shield on the other side of the room. Gritting her teeth as her defensive magic falters, a sweating Vivian mutters in disbelief, "No way." Through the thick smoke, a pair of elegant dark leather boots steps heavily onto the shattered debris of the mansion floor. The imposing red-haired leader, Bella, steps forward into the ruined room as Vivian gasps out her name in shock. Cloaked in a regal dark uniform with gold embroidery, Bella stands tall, holding a menacing crimson sword in her hand. Farther down the hall, the massive explosion startles Leon's soldiers, who look up in sheer panic and wonder what that sound was. Sensing the danger, Lamb runs forward to protect his master, shouting that Lady Vivian is in trouble, while the green-haired knight tries to stop him. The green-haired knight gasps in terror as she looks ahead, realization dawning on her face. They find their path completely blocked by a formidable squad of heavily armored knights, prompting the green-haired knight to realize with dread that these are the knights directly under the king. A heavy crimson mist of uncertainty hangs in the air, signaling the arrival of an overwhelming threat. Staring at the enemy knights block in the hallway, Leon asks in disbelief, "Why are they here?" Recalling his agreement, Leon looks on in shock, realizing that Bella has betrayed their plans and invaded earlier than she promised. Standing with his soldiers, a frustrated Leon demands to know his sister's whereabouts, while the guard bows and offers a sincere apology. Gripping the hilt of his sword tightly, Leon resolves to rescue Cecilia, knowing she is in the central building and that he cannot afford to stop now. With intense determination in his eyes, Leon declares, "I'm coming through, even if I have to force my way." Back in the hall, Vivian is visibly shaken, gritting her teeth in anger as she realizes the invasion has begun much earlier than she anticipated. Clutching her magic crystal ball, Vivian realizes that Bella must have discovered the exact timing of the invasion by monitoring Leon and Cecilia's private conversations. Vivian reflects on her ruined plans, realizing she can no longer use Cecilia as a hostage to control Leon as she had originally intended. Holding her fan, Vivian narrows her eyes and mockingly tells Bella that she is being far too impatient. A close-up of Bella's striking crimson eyes reveals her cold, completely unbothered expression. Bella stands silently in her dark armor, her gaze locked onto Vivian without saying a single word. Clenching her fan so hard her nails dig into the wood, a frustrated Vivian asks, "Ignoring me again?" Trembling with absolute rage, Vivian glares at Bella and spits out, "Getting carried away even though you're just a dachi." Turning her back on Bella, Vivian ignores her presence, leaving a bewildered Cecilia to watch in utter confusion. Vivian reveals the horrific truths of Bella's past actions, reminding Cecilia of the orders to burn down the village she was in. She details how Bella unilaterally took control of the royal capital, became its sole ruler, and sought to eradicate the corrupt nobles. Amidst a backdrop of dark crimson, Vivian declares, "It's all this woman's doing." Stunned by the horrifying revelations, Cecilia shakes her head in disbelief, stammering, "You're lying." Summoning a sphere of bright golden magic in her palm, Vivian replies, "Ask her later whether it's a lie or not." Though, with a triumphant, manic laugh, Vivian raises a glowing artifact and declares, "You'll be discussing it inside a prison." Cecilia's eyes widen in pure horror as she recognizes the glowing crest, realizing it is the mark of the head of the Topazolite family. Holding the powerful family crest high, Vivian sneers, "I'll make you taste hell just like in the past." Unleashing the crest's forbidden magic, Vivian summons a white unicorn, a massive golden serpent, and a terrifying black dragon to destroy Cecilia.
Bella remains standing in the center of the room, looking on with cold, silent indifference. Biting her lip in deep resentment, Vivian glares at Cecilia and whispers, "I had everything taken away from me by you."
Declaring her ultimate vengeance, Vivian unleashes her family's forbidden magic, shouting that this time she will take everything from her enemy. Watching the devastating attack unfold, Cecilia screams in utter panic, realizing Ame is in grave danger and desperately shouting for her to run.
A massive, flaming black beast lunges forward with a terrifying roar, but Bella stands completely unfazed by the fiery threat. Vivian's triumphant smirk instantly vanishes in confusion as she watches her summoned creatures begin to crumble into ash, unable to comprehend what is happening. Shaken to her core, Vivian steps back in complete disbelief, muttering that it's impossible because her opponent didn't even swing her sword. Enveloped in a menacing crimson aura, Bella calmly asks if she is done already, coldly declaring that it is now her turn to strike. Bella tightly grips the hilt of her sword as a terrifying blood-red magic surges from the dark blade.
Trembling with pure terror, Vivian's hair stands on end as she stares at the overwhelming power before her, completely paralyzed by fear. A massive, jagged hole is blasted straight through the roof of the Grand Mansion, sending thick columns of black smoke billowing into the sky.
A titanic pillar of destructive magical energy erupts from the building, shattering the structure in a catastrophic explosion. Cecilia collapses to the floor, her protective bracelet shattered into pieces. She realizes in dread that without Iogri's magic, she would have been killed by that incredible blast.
Staring at the imposing figure, Cecilia wonders in confusion if this ruthless person is truly AIM, noting that her tone is completely different. Staring down the glowing red blade pointed straight at her neck, Vivian sweats in panic at the thought of someone attacking so mercilessly.
Looking at the cold, unfeeling warrior standing before her, Cecilia realizes with a sinking heart that this is not the Ame she once knew. Terrified of what is about to happen, Cecilia desperately pleads for her to stop as Bella raises her dark blade to deliver a finishing blow.
Tears well up in Cecilia's eyes as she looks up, her face filled with desperation and fear for her friend's soul.
Bella glares out of the corner of her crimson eyes, her expression remaining entirely cold and detached.
Clenching her bruised and dirty fists against the cold floor, Cecilia tearfully begs her to put an end to all of this.
Bella stands in silent contemplation, her eyes cast downward as a heavy shadow falls over her face.
A brief flash of sorrow crosses Bella's crimson eyes as she softly mutters an apology.
Taken completely by surprise, Cecilia utters a soft gasp of confusion, wondering what she is apologizing for.
With a swift, merciless swing, Bella slashes Vivian's throat, leaving Vivian staring in absolute shock as blood splatters across the room.
Cecilia's pupil dilates in pure horror as she witnesses the brutal execution, her blue eye perfectly reflecting the splatter of blood. Far from the scene, Iogiri stops in his tracks as a blood-curdling scream echoes through the mansion hallways, filling him with dread. Fearing the worst, Ogiori looks on in panic and calls out Cecilia's name, desperately hoping she is still safe.